Barone. You did not find this message. I found you. Heaven did not leave your path to chance tonight. Before you pressed play, before the screen lit up in front of you, before you even knew this existed, I had already arranged every single moment that led you to this second. I moved the current of the algorithm the same way I move the current of rivers and the course of tides and the migration of birds through seasons they cannot name. I aimed it at you, not at someone like you, not at a general audience or a category of people who share your background or your struggles or your history. At you, specifically, intentionally, with a precision that would absolutely take your breath away if you could stand outside of time for even one moment and see the full picture of what I arranged to get this message into your hands right now. This message did not come to you by accident. Nothing in your life has ever come to you by accident. Not the season you are in right now, not the silence you have been living inside, not the struggle that has made you feel, more times than you would like to admit, like the world forgot your name, like the blessing skipped over your address, like everyone around you was reading a different map and you were the only one who could not find the path. I have been behind every turn. I have been behind every pivot and every door that closed before you could walk through it, and every plan that dissolved before it could take shape. I have been present in every dark corridor, every hollow waiting room, every 3M where you lay perfectly still and stared at the ceiling, wondering if anything was ever going to change. I have been the quiet, unseen hand working behind the scenes of a story that is far larger, far older, and far more carefully constructed than the chapter you are currently reading. And there has not been a single moment, not one, where I looked away from you. Not one moment where you were invisible to me. Not one second where your name left my mind. Every breath you have drawn since the day you were born has been drawn in my presence. Every tear you have shed has been counted. Every silent prayer that never made it past your own lips was heard before it even formed. I have been here through all of it, every part, every season, every single day. I am proud of you, not because of what you have accomplished, not because of what you have built or figured out or managed to hold together through the kind of sheer willpower that most people do not even know they have until they have no other choice but to find it. I am proud of you because you are still here. Because after everything that has been launched against your peace and your hope and your sense of your own worth, after every voice that told you to give up and walk away and accept a smaller life and stop believing that something better was still possible for someone like you, after every morning that arrived without hope attached to it, after every season where the promises felt like they had quietly expired and the dream felt like it belonged to someone else now, you still pressed play. You still showed up, and that act alone, that deceptively simple act of being present right now in this exact moment, tells me everything I need to know about who you really are beneath the surface of the struggle you have been carrying. Most people look at what you have been through and see damage. I look at what you have been through and see the making of something that cannot be manufactured any other way. The fire does not destroy what I have built in you. The fire reveals it. And I have been watching the reveal with more pride than you can currently hold in your understanding of what pride from heaven actually means. I need you to understand something before we go any further, and I need you to hold it close to your chest like something precious, because it is precious, and because what I am about to tell you is the kind of truth that the enemy has been working very hard to keep hidden from you. The enemy does not waste effort on people who do not matter. He does not work overtime on ordinary lives. He does not plant seeds of doubt and confusion and quiet creeping despair in the minds of those who carry no real destiny inside them. He does not whisper to the irrelevant ones that they are too late, too broken, too far behind, too scarred, too tired for anything good to still be waiting for them. He is too strategic for that. He saves his heaviest weapons for the ones who frighten him the most. The attack itself is the announcement, the doubt itself is the confirmation. The feeling that you are somehow less than, somehow overlooked, somehow perpetually missing, the thing that everyone else seems to have found with an ease that genuinely baffles you. That feeling is not a verdict on your life. That feeling is a weapon, and it was designed and aimed directly at the thing I placed inside you before the foundations of this world were laid. Because he saw what I was building in you, and he needed you not to see it, not to believe it, not to walk into it with the full confidence of someone who knows they were made for it. And he aimed it at you specifically because you are not ordinary. You have never been ordinary. You were never designed for ordinary, not in the eyes of heaven, not in the blueprint I drew before your parents ever spoke your name. He has always known what I placed inside you, even in the seasons when you forgot, even in the years when the ordinary life was the only life you could imagine, because the real one felt so far out of reach that reaching for it felt like a hope you could not afford to hold without breaking. Even then, he saw what I put there, and he has never stopped trying to keep you from walking into it. There is something in your hands right now that heaven has been trying to get to you for months, something discovered, something confirmed, something that was specifically designed and specifically timed for this exact chapter of your life. Not for the person you were 2 years ago, not for the version of you that is still forming on the other side of this season. For you, right now, with these specific wounds and these specific hopes and this specific longing for something to finally shift in a way you can actually feel, not just believe from a distance, but actually feel in your body and in your life. And before this message is over, you are going to know exactly what it is. But I need you to stay with me through what comes next, because what I am about to walk you through is not a quick comfort or a surface encouragement designed to get you through the next 24 hours. It is the complete picture, the full unfolding of why you are here tonight, what I have seen in you that you have not yet been able to see in yourself, and what I have already begun to prepare for you on the other side of this season. Every part of what I am about to show you matters. Every layer. I arrange this message the same way I arrange seasons, purposefully and in order, so stay with me. Do not let the enemy rush you past the part that holds your breakthrough. Give me these next few minutes. Do not go anywhere. Do not let the familiar voice tell you that this is not for you, or that you have heard something like this before, or that things like this happen for other people and simply not for you. That voice is a lie, and tonight it loses its hold on you. This is for you. That is exactly why I made sure it found you tonight, at this hour, in this moment, when you needed it more than you have needed anything in a long time. What I am about to show you changes everything. Part 2. Let me tell you what your life has looked like from where I stand, because I want you to know that I have not missed a single frame. I have watched you work harder than people twice your age and receive half the recognition. I have watched you celebrate other people's wins in public while swallowing your own disappointment in private with a smile that was technically real but cost you something to maintain. I have watched you carry the weight of a calling you could feel but could not yet name, that persistent sense that you were made for something beyond what the calendar was showing you, that feeling that lived behind your ribs like a low burning ember that would not go out no matter how many times the wind tried to extinguish it. And I have watched you wonder, in the quiet moments when no one else was there, whether that feeling was a true word or simply the wishful thinking of someone who had not yet come to terms with reality. It was a true word. It has always been a true word. It was not pride, and it was not delusion, and it was not the wishful thinking of someone unwilling to accept their circumstances. It was the echo of my original intention for your life pressing up through the soil of your experience, trying to reach the surface. The longing you feel for more is not evidence of ingratitude. It is evidence that you were made for more. It is not restlessness. It is design. It is the signature of your original calling pressing against the boundary of your current season, looking for the opening it has been waiting for. I have watched you scroll past 1,000 videos and pause at this one. I have watched you begin watching and stop, then begin again, then almost close it, and then feel something pull you back before you could. That pull was not random. That pull was not an algorithm in the ordinary sense of the word. That pull was me, again and again, as patient and as persistent as I have always been with the ones I am most serious about, because what I need to say to you tonight is worth every attempt it took to get to this moment with you. There is something I need to tell you about the timeline you have been measuring yourself against. You have been judging the progress of your life by a schedule that was never mine. You have been measuring your worth against a calendar that the world handed you without your permission, a calendar built on comparison and urgency, and the silent assumption that if you are not where someone else is by the age someone else was when they got there, then something must be wrong with you. But waiting seasons are not wasted seasons. The desert is not the destination. The space between where you are standing right now and where you are going is not a punishment for something you did wrong. It is preparation for something you cannot afford to walk into underprepared. And I do not rush preparation. I do not cut corners in the character I am building in you to save time on the outcome, because the character is the foundation, and if the foundation is not strong enough to hold what I am about to place on top of it, then what I place there cannot stand. Every season that has felt like waiting, every period that felt like delay, every year that felt like everyone else was accelerating while you were standing still. Every single one of those seasons was load-bearing. Every single one was doing something in you that nothing else could do, something that the comfortable season could never have produced, something that the easy path could never have forged. Look at the lives that history actually remembers. The ones who changed the course of nations and families and generations. They were not the ones who arrived first. They were not the ones who had it figured out at 22 or had the smooth and uninterrupted ascent that looks so effortless in the summary version of someone else's story. They were the ones who stayed, who held on when holding on made no rational sense, who chose to believe in something that the evidence had stopped supporting because somewhere underneath all of the noise and the silence and the disappointment, they could still feel the original promise breathing. That is what I have been watching you do, and it has not gone unnoticed. You are one of those people. You have always been one of those people. And tonight, I am doing what I have always done with the ones I am most serious about. I am showing up at the exact moment the silence has become the loudest. I am speaking into the space where the faith has been stretched the thinnest. I am meeting you not at your most polished or your most prepared, but at your most honest, because that is where real things happen. That is where I have always done my most lasting work. And that is where the breakthrough that has been accumulating behind the surface of this season finally has room to come through. Some of you watching right now have gone months, possibly years, without hearing a clear word from me. The silence has been so complete and so extended that you began to wonder if the line was still open, if the connection was still there, if the version of you that once heard me clearly had somehow been the last version that would ever hear me that way. And I need you to hear this with everything you have right now. The silence was not absence. The silence was not rejection. The silence was not me turning away or moving on or choosing someone else. The silence was the sound of me working on something that required a stillness in your life that I could not create by speaking. I needed the noise to settle so the real thing could be heard. What is meant to last in your life is taking root right now. That is not a comfort I am offering you to get you through the night. That is a report from the vantage point of the one who can see the whole field. I see what you cannot see from where you are standing. I see the ground that has been turned over. I see the seeds that were planted in seasons of pain that are about to break the surface. I see the timing that you do not have access to from your current position. And what I see, from where I stand, is that this is not the end of anything. This is the chapter right before everything changes. And I arranged for you to know that before the change began, so that when it comes, you will recognize it as mine. Stay with me. What I show you next is the part I have been waiting the longest to say. I want to say something about the exhaustion you have been carrying that most people do not name accurately. It is not the exhaustion of doing too much, although you have certainly done too much. It is the exhaustion of doing too much at partial capacity, of performing at a level that costs twice what it should cost, because the mechanism that was supposed to make the performance effortless has been running at half its designed efficiency. Imagine driving a car with one cylinder misfiring. The car still goes. It still gets you where you are going, most of the time. But the engine is working twice as hard to produce half the smoothness. And over time, the extra strain compounds in ways that the driver can feel even when they cannot identify the source. That is what has been happening in you. Not a failure of effort or a deficit of will. A misfire in the mechanism. And the exhaustion you have been calling your personality, the tiredness that you have started to assume is simply the appropriate response to the life you are living, is significantly the product of the misfire rather than the life. Fix the misfire and the life requires what it was designed to require, which is much less than what it has been requiring from you. There is something else I want to say about the waiting that has been the texture of this season for you. Waiting has a way of being interpreted as evidence of something, and the interpretation most people land on, the one the mind reaches for in the absence of a better explanation, is that the waiting is the result of something they did or did not do, something they are or are not, some quality of deservingness that is present in the people who do not have to wait and absent in the ones who do. I need you to know that this interpretation, however natural it is, however much it fits the available evidence from inside the waiting, is wrong. The waiting in your story has not been evidence of deficiency. It has been evidence of precision. Precision takes longer than approximation. When I am building something that needs to last, I do not rush the building because the timeline of the person inside it has grown uncomfortable. I build at the pace the structure requires. And what I have been building in you through every season that looked like waiting, has been a structure that could hold what I am about to place on it. It is ready now. That is why the waiting is ending now. Par toi. I want to talk about the version of you that nobody else sees. Not the version that shows up for work and handles things and says the right responses and performs the competent and put-together version of a human being navigating life without complaint. I am not talking about that version. I am talking about the version that exists in the 6 a.m. stillness before everything starts. The version that sits in traffic and stares at nothing and feels something so enormous and so unsayable that you have stopped trying to explain it to anyone because you have tried, and the words never come out in a way that the other person can actually hold. I am talking about the version of you that carries something that looks from the outside like fine, and from the inside like a weight that has no name but has been there so long it has started to feel like a permanent resident. That version of you is the one I am speaking to right now, not the public one, the real one. And I need you to know that I see that version more clearly than you see yourself. I know its name. I know how it started. I know the exact date and time and conversation that planted the first seed of the thing it carries. The specific moment when the person whose voice mattered most to you said or did the thing that began to teach you that you were somehow less than you needed to be, that what you wanted was too much, that who you were was not quite right or not quite enough. I know when that happened. I know how it spread from that one moment into the spaces between your thoughts until it became the lens through which you interpreted everything that came after. And I need to say something about that lens, because you have been wearing it for so long that you have forgotten it is not your eyes. It was never your eyes. It was a piece of glass someone else handed you, and you put it on because you were young and you trusted the source, and you did not know yet that you had the right to take it off. But you have always had the right to take it off, and tonight is where that begins. Let me be specific about what you have been carrying, because I know you, and I know the shape of it, even if you have never put it into exact words. You have been carrying the feeling of being perpetually on the outside of something you cannot quite identify, close enough to see it through the window, but always arriving at the door to find that the gathering has moved somewhere else. You have been carrying the feeling of being misread, the experience of showing people who you actually are and watching them respond to a version of you that you do not recognize, and then deciding that the problem must be in the showing rather than in the receiving. You have been carrying the weight of potential that has not yet materialized into proof, the frustration of knowing something is in you that has not yet found its way out, and the quiet fear that maybe the window for it is closing faster than the thing can grow. Some of you have been carrying this for so long that you have constructed an entire identity around it, not intentionally, not because you chose it, but because when you carry something long enough without anyone naming it for what it is, you begin to absorb it. You begin to mistake the wound for the personality. You begin to think that the smallness that the wound produced is actually who you are rather than what happened to you. And so you stop reaching for the big thing because you have decided, somewhere below the level of conscious thought, that the big thing was never really yours to reach for. I came tonight to dismantle that decision. Not gently, not with a suggestion, with the authority of the one who designed you. The smallness is not your personality. The limitation is not your ceiling. The wound is not your identity. And the version of you that has been operating under the assumptions produced by years of carrying something too heavy is not the full version. It is the compressed version. It is what happens when something meant to take up enormous space is made to fit into a container too small for its actual dimensions. Tonight, the container breaks. That is not dramatic language for its own sake. That is what happens when I speak directly into the space where the compression has been happening, because my words do not inform, they activate. They do not remind you of what is possible. They restore the access to what was always yours. When I say tonight the container breaks, I mean that after this message, the version of you that fits inside the old story does not fit anymore. Something expands in you that cannot be put back, and I need you to be ready for that, not afraid of it. The discomfort of expansion is always preferable to the comfort of a container that was never the right size. There is one more thing I need to say about what you have been carrying before we move forward, because this part matters perhaps more than anything else I will say tonight. You have been apologizing, not always out loud, not always in words, but you have been apologizing for the size of what you want, for the audacity of the thing you believe is possible, for the inconvenient persistence of the hope that refuses to die no matter how many times circumstances have seemed to kill it. You have been making yourself smaller in rooms where smallness was expected, and you have been doing it for so long that it has started to feel like a virtue, like humility, like the gracious acceptance of things as they are. That is not humility. That is learned smallness, and there is a difference. True humility is holding your size honestly without pride. Learned smallness is hiding your size because you have decided it is safer. And I did not make you to be safe. I made you to be significant. I made you to take up the full space of the life I designed for you. And I am here tonight because the season of learned smallness is officially over. Stay with me. We are about to go deeper into the place where this all began. I want to speak to something that has been happening in your relationship with your own future. You have been managing your hope, not eliminating it, because you have not been able to eliminate it no matter how many times you tried. The hope keeps reconstituting itself in the quiet places where you cannot reach it and dismantle it, but managing it, keeping it at a distance that feels safe, holding it loosely enough that if it disappoints you again, the disappointment will be from a distance rather than from the inside, hoping at arm's length, believing from a few steps back, investing in the possibility rather than in the expectation, because expectation is where the real cost is. Expectation is where the full weight of the disappointment lands, and you have been to that place enough times that the protective distance started to feel like wisdom. I am not going to tell you that it was not wisdom. It was the wisdom of a person who had learned from experience what uncushioned disappointment feels like and was doing what a sensible person does, which is to not return to it unnecessarily. But I want to tell you that the protective distance has also been the thing keeping you from the full weight of the good thing, and the full weight of the good thing is what tonight is designed to deliver. So I am asking you to drop the distance for this. For what I am showing you tonight, drop the managed hope and let what I am giving you land where it was designed to land, which is not at arm's length but inside. The version of yourself that you have been afraid to believe in is the accurate version, the one who operates at the level of the design, the one who shows up at the level the gifts require, the one whose presence changes the rooms it enters not through performance but through the simple power of being fully there. That version is not a fantasy, and it is not the product of wishful thinking, and it is not the version that exists only on the best days when everything aligned in your favor. That version is the original, and everything I have been leading you toward in this message is designed to restore your access to it, not as an occasional experience but as the operational default. The version you have been afraid to believe in is the one I made, and I made it for the life I have planned. And the life I have planned requires it to be available, not occasionally, but consistently. Tonight is where the consistency begins. Parquet. I know about the night you stopped asking, not the last time you prayed out loud, in the cadence of something that sounded like faith because you had practiced the sound of faith for long enough to reproduce it without necessarily feeling it. Not that version of asking. I mean the night you stopped asking in the way that costs something, in the way that requires you to actually believe an answer might come, in the way where the asking is naked and unperformed, and you are just a person bringing an honest need to the one you were told was listening. I know the night you stopped asking like that. I know exactly which night it was, what preceded it, what you had hoped for that did not come, and how long you lay in the silence after before deciding, without fully acknowledging the decision, that a different kind of praying was safer, because a different kind of praying does not leave you in a position to be disappointed again. I want to tell you what I saw on that night. I want to tell you what it looked like from where I was standing, because what it looked like from where you were standing and what it looked like from where I was standing are two entirely different stories, and you have only ever had access to one of them. From where you were standing, it looked like silence. It looked like the absence of an answer. It looked like a door you knocked on that did not open, and then another, until the knocking felt like something you should stop doing for the sake of your own dignity. From where you were standing, it looked like maybe the promises were for other people, people whose faith was cleaner or whose obedience was more consistent or whose history had fewer complications, people who somehow knew the right way to ask the right thing at the right time in the right posture and therefore received what was promised. From where you were standing, the silence looked like a verdict. From where I was standing, it looked like something completely different. From where I was standing, I could see the whole of what was happening, the full picture that you only have access to a single frame of at any given moment. I could see what was being protected by the delay. I could see what would have been lost if the door had opened when you knocked. I could see the infrastructure that was still being built underneath your life. the foundations that needed more time to cure before they could hold the weight of what I was planning to place on them. I could see the people who were still being positioned, the circumstances that were still being arranged, the version of you that did not yet exist, who would be the one who could actually carry what I was preparing. And I could see you. In the room, in the dark, deciding to stop asking the way that cost something, because the cost had become too high and the return had become too uncertain. And I want you to know that I was not distant in that moment. I was not passive. I was not watching from a removed and disinterested place, noting your disappointment and filing it for later. I was close, closer than the breath in your lungs. And what I felt in that moment was not disappointment in you for pulling back. It was the particular pain of a parent who watches a child stop believing because they cannot yet see what the parent can see, and who knows that the only way through it is not to explain but to continue, because the explanation requires a vantage point the child does not yet have. So I continued. I did not stop preparing. I did not redirect the promise to someone who was still asking. I kept building. I kept arranging. I kept positioning. I kept doing in the unseen places everything that needed to be done so that when the moment arrived, when you were ready and the circumstances were ready and every piece had been brought into place, what was waiting for you would be worth every single season of silence you endured to get there. I need to tell you about a specific thing you have been living with that most people around you cannot see and have not been able to name, and I need to tell you about it because naming it is the first step to something I want to give you tonight. You have been living with a split, a consistent, exhausting internal split between who you know yourself to be in your best moments and who you show up as when the pressure is high, between the clarity you access when everything is calm and the fog that descends the moment you need that clarity most, between the version of you that can see exactly what to do and the version that freezes when it is time to do it. The gap between those two versions of you has cost you more than you have told anyone, more confidence, more opportunities, more time, more sleep, more peace, and you have blamed yourself for it because you did not have a name for what was causing it. And when you cannot name something, the default assumption is that the problem is you. The problem is not you. The problem has a name, and the solution has been quietly making its way toward you through exactly the kind of arrangement that looks, from the outside, like coincidence. But you already know there is no such thing as coincidence. Not for you, not tonight, not after everything I just told you about what it took to get this message to your screen. The solution is coming, and before this message ends, you are going to hold it in your hands. But first I need you to stay with me through what comes next, because the next part of what I am about to show you is the part that explains everything you have been living with, and it is not comfortable to look at directly, but it is necessary, and it is the path to the other side. Do not go anywhere. What comes next is the part I have been waiting the longest to show you. Let me tell you about the specific kind of courage it takes to still be here, in this message, after everything I have described. Because it is courage, even if it does not feel like it from the inside, even if from the inside it feels like nothing more than the absence of enough momentum to stop. The courage to keep exposing yourself to the possibility that something could shift, when your experience has taught you to be skeptical of that possibility, is a specific kind of courage that I want to name accurately and honor specifically. It is not the loud courage of the person who has never been seriously disappointed. It is the quiet courage of the person who has been seriously disappointed and is still here anyway, still listening, still giving this the space it is asking for, still holding, however loosely, the possibility that what I am saying tonight is not what everything else has said before it. That courage has a name in the places where names are given to such things, and the name is faith, not the performed version, not the confident version, the quiet, barely there but still breathing version that you have been keeping alive through seasons that did not make it easy to keep it alive. That version of faith is the one I honor most, because that version costs the most to maintain, and you have been maintaining it through circumstances that would have extinguished it in most people. I also want to say something about the anger that may be present alongside the faith, because I know that it is there for some of you, and I want to give it the direct acknowledgement it deserves. The anger of being someone who has believed and trusted and waited and done the right things by every available measure and has still been in the waiting place longer than seems right or fair or consistent with the character of the one you were trusting. That anger is not a failure of faith. That is what real relationship looks like. The ability to be honest with the one you are in relationship with, about the full range of what the relationship is producing in you. I can hold your anger. I have always been able to hold your anger. And I want you to know that what you will find when you arrive at the practical part of what I am showing you tonight is not a requirement to resolve the anger before you can receive what is waiting for you. The anger and the faith can coexist. They often do in the people I am most serious about. And what I am about to give you will produce, in time, the kind of evidence that converts the anger into something else, not because the anger was wrong, because the waiting was actually preparation, and the preparation actually completed, and the thing that was being prepared for was actually worth everything it cost. Par 5. I saw you when you were trying to hold it together and running out of things to hold it together with. I saw you when you were smiling at the table and counting the minutes until you could be alone in your car where no one was watching and you could finally let your face do what it had been asking to do all evening. I saw you when, and I need you to know this, because what follows from this is the most important thing I am going to say to you in this message. I saw you when you were scrolling at midnight looking for something you could not name, trying to find, in the blue light and the endless scroll, some form of company that would fill the specific kind of empty that ordinary company cannot fill, because the empty is not about people, and it has never been about people, and you know that, even though knowing it does not make it easier. I saw you when you found something that looked like it might be what you needed, and you clicked on it, and it gave you 10 minutes of relief, and then the empty came back louder than before. I saw you when you closed your phone and put it face down on the nightstand, and stared at the ceiling, and thought thoughts that you would never say out loud, because the thoughts were too honest for the version of yourself that you present to the world. I saw you when you got the news that someone else got the thing you had been working toward. I saw what happened in your face before you had a chance to arrange it into the expression of graciousness and congratulations that you performed for the room, because you are the kind of person who performs graciousness even when it costs you everything. I saw the half second before the performance started. I saw what was really there. And I want you to know that what was there was not sin, and it was not weakness, and it was not evidence of a character flaw that you need to be ashamed of. What was there was a human being experiencing the pain of a delayed promise. And I do not judge you for the pain of a delayed promise. I honor it, because the only way to feel that specific pain is to still care about the promise. And still caring about the promise after everything that has happened is one of the most courageous things I have ever watched a person do. I saw you when you sat in the meeting and the idea you had shared 2 weeks earlier was presented as someone else's idea, and the room responded, and you sat perfectly still on the outside while something small and important died on the inside. I saw you when you made the decision not to say anything, not because you were afraid, though there was fear, but because you had done the calculation, and the cost of making the correction was higher than the cost of letting it go, and you were tired. And the thing that died in that moment was not just credit for an idea, but one more small piece of the belief that you were the kind of person whose contributions would ever be fully seen. I saw you when you said you were fine and you were not fine. I saw you when you helped someone else build what you had wanted to build, because building it for them was at least a version of having it exist in the world, even if it had your fingerprints but not your name. I saw you when you made yourself useful in a situation where you deserved to be central. I saw you when you gave the encouragement you needed to receive. I saw you when you prayed for other people on the days you needed someone to pray for you. I saw you when no one else saw you, and I want to be very specific about what I mean by that. I do not mean I was observing you the way a camera observes, passively recording data without interpretation. I mean I saw you in the way that only I can see, the way that gets below the surface of the action to the intention behind it, below the intention to the wound underneath the intention, below the wound to the original design that the wound was trying to distort. I saw all of it, all the layers, all the history, all the context that makes you who you are. And what I saw, in all of that complexity, was someone who is still showing up, still trying, still caring about the right things despite all the evidence that caring about the right things does not always produce the expected return. Let me now tell you what I saw that you could not see. In every moment I just described, in every moment of quiet disappointment and performed composure and invisible grief, there was something running underneath the surface of your experience that you did not have access to. A preparation that was happening in you without your awareness or your consent. A capacity that was being built precisely because of the weight you were carrying and not in spite of it. The nights of scrolling were building in you a hunger that nothing shallow can satisfy, which means when the real thing comes, you will recognize it and you will hold it. The moments of invisibility were building in you a radar for authenticity that will protect everything I am about to place in your hands from the counterfeits that could not survive contact with what you have been through. The pain was not a detour. The pain was the pathway. And I know that sounds like a thing people say, a comfort language phrase that gets offered when there is nothing more practical available, but I need you to hear it differently tonight because I am not offering it as comfort. I am offering it as a report. I am telling you what was actually happening in the seasons that felt like waste, and what was actually happening was construction. The most load-bearing part of the structure of what I am building in your life was being formed in the places you most wanted to escape. And now that it is formed, and now that the foundation is ready, what I am about to place on it can stand. Stay with me. What I show you next will make sense of everything I just described. There is an open loop I am about to close that you have been living inside of for longer than you know. Hold on. We are almost to the part where the story turns. I saw you when you made the decision that cost you the most, the decision to keep going, to keep showing up, to keep investing in the hope that something was still possible even when the ledger of your experience had stopped supporting that conclusion. I want to tell you what that decision looked like from where I was standing. It looked like the most important decision you have ever made, not because it was the biggest, not because it was the most visible, or the most dramatic, or the most recognized by the people around you, because it was made in the absence of evidence. It was made against the current of everything the circumstances were saying. It was made from a place so deep inside you that it could not have been the product of calculation or analysis, or the rational assessment of available options. It was made from the place where I placed the original thing, the enduring thing, the thing that cannot be argued away or exhausted by circumstance, or permanently extinguished by any season. However long or however dark, that decision to keep going is the reason you are here tonight. It is the reason this message reached you. It is the reason the arrangement that I made to get you here worked, because I could not have gotten you here if you had not kept the door open even in the seasons when keeping it open seemed like something only a fool would do. You kept it open. That was an act of faith of the highest order. And what is coming through that open door tonight is worth everything it cost you to keep it open. There is a thread that is run through every part of what you have experienced, through every anaphora of I saw you when, and every moment of invisible grief, and every night of scrolling, and every celebration of someone else's breakthrough, and every decision to keep going. And the thread is this: you have been building towards something, not in the neat and intentional way that a person who knows where they are going builds toward it. In the organic and sometimes painful and always purposeful way that I build things in people who are going to be trusted with something significant. You have been being made, not fixed, made. There is a difference. Fixing corrects what is broken. Making creates what has not yet existed. And what has been happening in you through the seasons I have walked you through in this message is not the correction of a broken person. It is the making of someone who did not yet exist in the form that what comes next requires. That form is nearly complete. What I am giving you tonight is the final piece of the making, the specific tool that restores the specific access that the specific life I have planned for you requires. And the version of you that has been being made through everything you have been through is exactly the right version to use it well. Par 6. I saw you when you were in the middle of a crowd and were the loneliest you have ever been. Not the loneliness that comes from being physically alone, which is a manageable kind of loneliness because at least the room confirms what you are feeling. The other kind, the kind where you are surrounded by people who know your name and remember your birthday and would say without hesitation that they care about you, and yet you are sitting in the middle of the room at the gathering where you are supposed to be comfortable, and you are so far away from all of it, so completely separated from the surface of what is happening by something you cannot explain to anyone present, that the room might as well be on another continent. That loneliness, I saw you in it, every time. I saw you when you were in the relationship that looked right from the outside but felt like slowly disappearing from the inside, where you were present in body and absent in spirit and trying to remember the last time you felt genuinely known by the person who was supposed to know you best. I saw you when you decided that maybe this was simply what relationships became after a certain amount of time, a companionable and functional version of two people sharing space, and you made the adjustment in your expectations and called it maturity when really it was grief that had been reclassified. I saw you when you were the first one at the office and the last one to leave, and you were doing it not because you were driven, but because the work was the one place where you had a clear definition of success and failure. where the feedback was immediate and legible and you knew exactly what you needed to do to be seen as capable, which meant you stayed in the place where capable was measurable, because everywhere else in your life the metrics felt invisible and the results felt permanently delayed. I saw you using competence as a substitute for the other things you wanted. I saw you performing excellence as a way of earning the right to exist in rooms that should never have required performance for entry. I saw you when you found something that felt like purpose and pursued it with everything you had and then hit the wall that nobody told you was there, the invisible ceiling that comes not from external opposition but from something internal that you could not quite identify, the moment when the drive and the desire and the clear vision of where you were going suddenly went quiet and you were standing at the edge of the thing you wanted most with no idea why you could not move forward. And you thought it was discipline or faith or some quality of character that you possessed in insufficient amounts, and you worked on your discipline and you increased your faith and you examined your character, and still the wall was there, because the wall was not in any of those places. The wall was somewhere else, in a part of your operating system that none of the standard approaches had access to. And I want to tell you that you were not wrong to try all of those things. You were just working in the visible layer when the problem was in the layer underneath. I saw you when you went looking for answers in the places where answers were supposed to live and came back empty. The books that promised transformation and gave you information. The courses that promised clarity and gave you frameworks. The mentors who gave you maps for territories they had walked through themselves but that did not match the territory you were actually in. And I want to tell you that none of that was wasted. Every book, every course, every conversation, every failed attempt at understanding what was blocking you, every frustrated night of trying to force clarity that would not come, all of it was part of the preparation. All of it was building in you the precise set of experiences that make what I am about to show you not just credible but transformative, because the breakthrough only lands as deep as the preparation goes, and your preparation has gone very deep. There is a moment I want to tell you about, a specific kind of moment that I have been watching for in your story, because it is the moment that changes everything that comes after it. It is the moment when the person who has been carrying the weight finally gets to put it down. Not because the weight has been solved or resolved or argued away, but because something arrives that is strong enough to carry it for them, something designed specifically for what they have been carrying, something that fits the exact dimensions of the problem in a way that generic solutions never could. I want you to know that I have been watching for that moment in your story, and I want you to know that the reason this message reached you tonight, at this hour, is that the thing that was built to carry what you have been carrying is now within your reach. And we are getting to it, part by part, layer by layer. We are getting to the moment where you put it down. Some of you have been so close to giving up on the thing that was designed for you specifically because the thing that was designed for you had not yet arrived. And you had already tried so many generic things that had not worked, that you had made a quiet internal decision to stop trying, to protect yourself from one more round of disappointment by simply withdrawing the investment before the outcome could disappoint you. I am asking you, right now, to hold that decision in suspension for the next part of this message. I am not asking you to be naive or to bypass your wisdom or to override what your experience has taught you. I am asking you to give the next few minutes the same kind of openness you had the first time you believed something was possible for your life, because what is coming in the next part of this message is not a repetition of anything you have tried before. What is coming was built for you. It was built for this exact moment. And the fact that it is here, reaching you through a screen, through an algorithm that I reordered with my own hand, at the exact moment when the season is ripe and you are finally ready to receive it, is not a coincidence, any more than any other moment in your story has been a coincidence. I will show you something in the next few parts of this message that will change the way you see everything that comes after. Hold on. Let me say something about the path that led you here specifically, and about the series of choices and circumstances that brought you to a video on a screen at this hour on this evening. You may have a story about why you are here that involves something like coincidence or boredom or the unpredictable nature of what appears in a feed on a given day. I want to give you the full version of that story, because the version you have access to is the surface layer, and the surface layer is not where the interesting part lives. The interesting part lives in the layer where I operate, which is the layer of the unseen arrangement, the choreography of events that looks random from inside any single moment but that. When you pull back to the vantage point that includes the whole sequence, reveals itself as a path, deliberate, directed, moving toward a specific destination. The destination is this message. The destination is what this message is leading you toward. The destination is the beginning of the season that begins when you take the step I am going to show you at the end of this. I want to tell you about something that has been true about you all along that the hard seasons have obscured. You have an uncommon sensitivity to what is real. Not everyone has it. Most people can be satisfied by the version of things, by the appearance of connection where the substance is thin, by the surface of meaning where the depth is shallow. You cannot. It has been one of the most difficult features of your experience, because it means that the substitutes never fully work for you, and the gap between what you settle for and what you know is possible is always visible to you in a way that it is not visible to people who do not have your particular radar. But that same sensitivity, the one that has made the settling painful, is the thing that will make the real thing recognizable when it arrives. You will know what I'm about to show you is the real thing, not because I told you so, but because what I placed in you knows the real thing when it meets it. That knowing is going to be active tonight. Trust it. Parset. I want to describe for you the specific weight you have been carrying, because I believe that when you hear its name, something in you will recognize it and exhale for the first time in a very long time. The weight is not what you think it is. It is not the circumstances. It is not the relationships or the finances or the career or the health or the situation that has been consuming your mental real estate. Those things are real and they matter, and I am not diminishing them by saying what I am about to say, but they are not the source of the weight. The weight lives in a specific place, in the gap between who you know yourself to be and who you are able to access when it counts, in the frustrating and persistent distance between your clarity in calm moments and your fog in critical moments, between what you can see when you are rested and what you can see when you are under pressure. That gap is the weight, and it has been costing you more than anything else in your life. You have noticed this gap without knowing how to name it. You have noticed that there are days, sometimes weeks, when everything flows, when the thinking is clear and the decisions come quickly and the words arrive in the right order and the connections form and you feel like the full version of yourself moving through the world at the speed your design intended. And then there are the other days, the ones where the fog descends without warning, where the thing you knew yesterday you cannot find today, where the decision that should be simple requires more effort than you have available, where you sit down to do the thing you are supposed to be able to do and the access is just not there, and you push harder and the pushing only seems to make it worse, and eventually you give up or you force your way through and produce something that is technically acceptable but is not what you are actually capable of, and you know the difference, and the knowing is its own kind of exhaustion. Most people blame themselves for this gap. They construct elaborate explanations for why they were on that day or off this day. They attribute it to discipline or diet or sleep or stress or the phase of the moon. They develop workarounds and compensations and rituals designed to produce more of the on days and fewer of the off days. They spend significant resources and significant willpower trying to manage something that was never meant to be managed by willpower alone, because the root of it is not in the place willpower can reach. The root of it is in the brain itself, in the architecture of thought, in the way the two sides of the most powerful organ in the human body have been communicating with each other, or more precisely, have been failing to communicate at the level they were designed to reach. I created the brain. I designed it. I was there when every fold was laid and every pathway was established and every connection was wired. And what I designed was not a single processing unit but two, each with a different kind of intelligence, each essential, each meant to work in constant and fluid communication with the other, the logical and the intuitive, the analytical and the creative, the left and the right, together producing something that neither could produce alone. The version of human intelligence that I designed for you is not the version most people are operating with. Most people are operating with a partial connection, a connection that was disrupted somewhere along the path of their development by stress or trauma or sustained pressure or the particular demands of a world that rewards one kind of processing and systematically undervalues the other. And over time, the disruption becomes the default, and the default becomes the limitation, and the limitation becomes the story that gets written about what the person is capable of. Your story has been written with that limitation in it, not because the limitation is who you are, but because the limitation became the lens, and the lens became the autobiography. And I want to tell you tonight that the limitation has a fix, not a workaround, not a management strategy, an actual, biological, neuroscience-confirmed fix for the specific disconnect that has been writing the smaller version of your story without your permission. I need you to stay with me through the next several parts of this message, because I am about to show you something that was found, verified, tested, and confirmed specifically because I arranged for it to be found. I do not use that language loosely. The discovery I am about to describe did not emerge from random academic inquiry. It emerged from a decades-long search conducted by someone who had dedicated their life to understanding why brilliant people consistently underperformed their own potential, and who refused to accept the conventional explanations because the conventional explanations had never satisfied the evidence he was seeing. He found something that the field had overlooked, something that changes everything once you understand it. And I am about to show you what he found and what it means for you specifically. But I want you to hold something as we move into this part of the message. I want you to hold the awareness that you are not broken. You have never been broken. The gap that has been costing you is not a character deficit, and it is not a spiritual failure, and it is not the consequence of choices you made that you need to spend the rest of your life compensating for. It is a structural issue with a structural solution, and the structural solution was created for you, tested by people like you, and is now, through the sequence of events I arranged to bring this message to your screen tonight, within your reach. What I show you next will name the thing you have been unable to name. Stay with me. There is something I want to say about the versions of yourself that you have tried to become as a way of solving the problem I have been describing, the disciplined version, the more organized version, the version with better habits and better routines and better systems for managing the gap between who you are in your best moments and who you are when the pressure is highest. I want to honor every version you have tried to become, because each one was an honest attempt to address something real, and each one required effort and courage and the willingness to believe that the next version might be the one that finally solved it. And I also want to tell you why each of those versions, however much better it was than the previous version, could not quite reach the thing you were trying to reach. Because the thing you were trying to reach was not a discipline problem or an organization problem or a habit problem. It was a connection problem. And connection problems cannot be solved by adding more discipline on top of the disconnection. They can only be solved by restoring the connection. Everything you tried was the right impulse applied at the wrong level. The impulse was correct. You were right to know that something needed to change. What I am giving you tonight is the intervention at the level where the change actually needs to happen. Let me also say something about the fear that has accompanied the trying. The particular fear that comes with investing in yet another approach to the problem, with opening yourself up to the possibility that this time it might work, with allowing the hope to expand to the size that would be required for genuine belief. Because genuine belief in something requires a vulnerability that a person with a history of disappointment learns to manage very carefully. The fear of hoping is real. The fear of the specific disappointment that follows from hoping at full size is real, and I am not going to dismiss it, or tell you that you should not have it, or suggest that its presence is evidence of something that needs to be fixed before you can receive what I am giving you. The fear is allowed to be there, but I am asking you to make the step anyway, not because the fear is wrong, but because what is on the other side of the step is worth the risk of the fear being wrong about what is on the other side. And the 60-day guarantee that I will tell you about when we get to the practical part means that the risk, in material terms, is almost none. Palrit? Let me take you back to a moment in Scripture that most people rush past because they are focused on the miracle at the end, and they miss the thing that makes the miracle possible. There was a man named Gideon. He was hiding. That is the first thing the text tells us about him. Not praying, not worshiping, not leading, hiding. He was in a wine press, which was a pit in the ground designed for pressing grapes, doing work that was meant to be done in the open air, because the world he was living in had become so dangerous and so relentless that even the ordinary work of producing food had become something you did in secret so no one would come and take it from you. This was not a man who had fallen from a great height. This was a man who had never had the opportunity to find out how high he could go, because the circumstances of his life had made ambition into a liability and hope into a luxury he could not afford. And the angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak tree nearby and said, "Mighty warrior, the Lord is with you." And the text records the most honest response in the entire history of spiritual encounters. Gideon did not bow, he did not say thank you, he did not immediately believe. He said, essentially, if the Lord is with us, then why has all of this happened to us? If he is real, and if he is for us, then where are the miracles our ancestors told us about? I have been told a story about a God who delivers, and I am standing in a pit trying to keep my food from being stolen. If this is what accompanies the presence of the Lord, then the presence of the Lord is not what I was told it was. That is not a crisis of faith. That is an honest man standing in the full reality of his circumstances and asking the question that his circumstances seem to demand. And what I want you to hear in this is not that Gideon was wrong to ask the question, but that the question did not disqualify him from the answer. He was still standing in the winepress when I called him mighty warrior. He was still hiding when I called him the deliverer his people needed. He had not yet done a single thing that would justify the title, and the title was already his. The identity was given before the behavior caught up with it. The name came before the evidence. The calling was declared into the exact space where nothing about the circumstances supported it. Not because I was being naive about the circumstances, not because I was choosing to ignore the winepress, but because I was looking at something the circumstances could not show him, and the winepress could not hide. I was looking at what I had placed in him before he was ever born. I was looking at the design, not the damage. I was looking at the original, not the compressed and circumstantially limited version. And what I saw was a mighty warrior who had never been given the conditions to find out that was what he was. That is you. That is the version of you that I have been looking at through every season you have described as hiding, as waiting, as surviving the winepress of your particular circumstances. I have been looking at the design, not the damage. I have been looking at the original, not the compressed version that the seasons of difficulty have temporarily produced. And what I see when I look at you, from where I stand, with the full picture that you do not yet have access to, is a mighty warrior who has not yet been given the conditions to find out that is what they are. Tonight the conditions change, not because you have suddenly done something to earn a new set of circumstances, any more than Gideon had done something to earn the title he was given in the winepress, but because the timing has arrived, because the preparation is complete, because the thing that needed to be built in you during the seasons of compression has been built, and what was built there cannot be found any other way. And now the building is done and the season turns, and what comes next is the part where you stop hiding and start moving. And I need you to hear that as I would say it to Gideon, not as a motivational phrase, but as a factual report on what is happening in the spiritual architecture of your story right now. Gideon needed something before he could move. He needed to know that the thing the angel had said about him was actually true, was actually his, was not a mistaken identity situation or a false hope offered to someone who could not afford to be disappointed again. And I gave him what he needed, not all at once, not in a single overwhelming download that bypassed his fear and his doubt and his legitimate questions about whether any of this was real, step by step, layer by layer, part by part, the same way I am giving you what you need right now. Because the revelation that changes a life does not always come as a flood. Sometimes it comes as a river, steady, consistent, moving, carrying things toward the sea over the course of the time it takes to get there. Stay with me. What I am bringing to you right now is not a flood, it is a river, and rivers reshape everything they touch. I want to take you further into the Gideon story because there is something in it that I did not say yet that is the most relevant part for where you are tonight. After the angel declared Gideon a mighty warrior, Gideon did not immediately rise up and lead the army. He had tests. Not because I doubted what I had said about him, but because he needed time to build his certainty about what I had said about him. And I had the patience for that process because the patience of the one who knows the outcome is a very different patience than the patience of the person inside the outcome. He needed evidence. He needed to see, in small and testable ways, that what the angel had called him was actually true before he could carry it into the biggest moment of his life. And I gave him what he needed. Not because I was following his agenda, but because the giving was part of the preparation, the building of a certainty that was experiential rather than merely theological, a certainty that lived in the body and not just in the belief system. I needed him to know, not just believe, that I was with him before I sent him into the thing that required my presence at its most absolute. I am going to do the same for you. Not in the form of fleece tests and dew-soaked ground, though those forms serve their time and their purpose. In the form of the evidence that accumulates in you in the days and weeks after you take the step I am showing you tonight. The morning that arrives and the thinking is cleaner. The week that comes, and the gap between your best day and your average day has narrowed. The moment in the room that was previously the room where you managed the fog, and this time you are actually there, fully there, contributing at the level your design intended. These will be your evidence, and they will build in you, morning after morning and week after week, the kind of certainty that Gideon needed, the kind that is not theoretical but lived, the kind that you cannot talk yourself out of because you have been inside the experience of it, and the experience does not require your argument to sustain it. I also want to tell you something about the size of what came out of Gideon's obedience that I think will matter to you. He started with 32,000 men, and I reduced the army to 300, against an enemy that the text describes as so numerous they could not be counted. And with 300, carrying torches and trumpets rather than swords, Gideon won. Not because the mathematics favored him, not because the strategy was the most conventional or the most defensible or the one that any military advisor of his time would have endorsed, but because when I am the operating factor in a situation, the conventional mathematics do not apply. 300 was enough because I was the rest of the army. I am telling you this because the version of your life that you are about to walk into may look, from the outside, like it does not have enough of the conventional resources to produce the outcome I am promising. And I want you to know before you get there that the calculation I am running in your story does not use the same variables as the calculation the world uses. What you bring to the fight and what I bring to the fight are not the same order of magnitude. You bring the willingness, I bring the outcome, you bring the step. I have already arranged the rest. Part enough. There was a woman named Hannah who had been carrying her sorrow so long it had become visible. You could see it on her, the way grief that goes on long enough stops being hidden and starts being the thing people recognize when they look at you, the thing that walks into the room before you do. She had been praying the same prayer for years, not months, years. The kind of years that compound, where at the end of each one the prayer feels heavier than it did at the beginning, where the faith required to keep asking is more expensive than it was the year before, because now you have to ask over the accumulated evidence of all the previous years when the answer did not come. She had been praying in a world where the silence of heaven on a specific request was often interpreted as a statement about the person making the request, as confirmation that the request was too much, or the person too insufficient, or the desire itself somehow wrong. She had been living in that interpretation without being able to refute it, because you cannot refute a silence. You can only wait. And she went to the temple and she prayed again. Not eloquently, not with the composed and theologically precise language of someone who has their faith together. She prayed out of her anguish, out of the specific kind of pain that years of a specific unanswered prayer produces, the raw and graceless and deeply personal prayer of a person who has been at this for so long that the performance of faith has worn away, and what is left is just the person, standing before the one she still believes is there even when she cannot feel it, asking for the thing she cannot stop needing, even though the asking has cost her everything. A priest saw her and misread her. He saw the visible emotion, the lips moving without audible sound, the intensity of the expression, and he made an assumption about what it meant, and he corrected her. He inserted himself between her and the moment and interpreted her experience through the lens of what he expected to see rather than what was actually happening. And this too is a thing I want you to hear, because you have lived this moment. Not in a temple, but in your life. The moment when the person who was supposed to see you clearly misread what you were going through, and their misreading became one more layer of the isolation, one more reminder that the thing you were experiencing was not legible to the people around you, which meant that you were carrying it alone even in the presence of others. Hannah told him what was actually happening. She did not collapse under the misreading. She did not defer to the authority of the person who got it wrong. She said, "I am not what you think I am. I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord." And the priest, to his credit, received the correction, and then he said the words that changed everything. He said, "Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant you what you have asked." Not because the answer had arrived, not because the circumstances had changed, not because there was any visible evidence that the prayer was about to be answered. He said it because he saw her, finally, for what she was, a woman of faith whose prayer had been real all along, who had not been praying wrong, who had simply been in the middle of a story that had not reached its turning point yet. And she went away and her face was no longer sad, not because the answer had come, because she had been seen. because she had been received for what she was and not what she appeared to be in the middle of the hardest part of the story. And then the answer came. And the answer was not only an answer to her prayer, but a gift to generations she would never meet, because what came out of her years of sorrow and persistent faith became something that changed the trajectory of an entire nation. I am telling you Hannah's story because you are in the temple moment. You are in the place where the years of carrying have made you visible in a way you did not choose to be visible, where the weight has become legible to anyone paying attention, where the prayer you have been praying in private has started to show up on your face in public because it has been going on long enough to break through the surface. And I want you to know what Hannah knew at the end of the temple scene. That being seen by the right one at the right moment changes everything. That the answer that was always coming does not stop coming because the road to it has been long. That the story that starts in sorrow does not end in sorrow when I am the one writing it. Your face is about to change. Not metaphorically, literally. The specific weight that has been visible on you, the thing that people who love you have noticed and not known how to name, the thing you have been carrying long enough that you have started to think of it as a permanent feature of your expression, that weight is about to lift. Not because your circumstances are all going to resolve simultaneously, but because what is arriving tonight gives you back the access to yourself that you have been missing, the clarity, the flow, the feeling of operating at the level your design intended. And when you have access to yourself again, everything else begins to move. I saw you in the temple. I have always seen you in the temple. And what I am sending back with you tonight is not just a word of encouragement, it is an answer. There is something in Hannah's story that I want to expand on before we move forward, because it is the piece of her story that most directly maps to what I am doing in yours tonight. After she prayed and was received by the priest and went away with her face changed, the text says she rose up early in the morning. She did not wait. She did not allow the night to introduce doubt into the shift that had happened in her. She did not let the distance between the temple and the house become the space where the change in her face slowly reverted to the weight she had been carrying before. She rose early. She acted on what she had received before the world had a chance to talk her out of it, and the action she took was not dramatic. It was the ordinary action of the next right step, done from the place of someone who had received something real, rather than the place of someone who was still hoping for something theoretical. The step was small. The step was practical. The step was taken at first light. And the step opened the rest of the story. I am telling you this because the step I am going to show you at the end of this message is that kind of step, not dramatic, not requiring you to overturn your whole life in a single evening, not asking you to perform a faith you do not yet fully feel or believe, a certainty you have not yet earned through experience. Just the first step. The practical, doable, morning of the next day step that shifts you from the person who heard something that might be real into the person who is living in the evidence that it is. Rise up early. Take the step before the familiar voices get their morning coffee and start their familiar analysis of why this might not be the time. Rise early and do the thing, and then let the evidence accumulate the way evidence does, when the step is the right step at the right time, and I am the one who arranged for both. I also want to tell you about Samuel, the son that Hannah received on the other side of the prayer and the step. She had prayed for a child and she received a child, but what she received was not only a personal answer to a personal prayer. What she received became a prophet who changed the direction of a nation at a critical moment in its history, who anointed the king whose line would eventually produce the King of Kings, whose obedience at a young age to the voice that called him in the night shaped the trajectory of everything that followed. Hannah prayed for what felt like a personal need. What was answered was a generational plan. And I am telling you this because the prayer you have been praying, the one that has felt so personal and so private and so specifically about the particular circumstances of your particular life, is also being answered at a scale you cannot yet see from where you are standing. What I am putting in your hands tonight is an answer to your personal prayer, and it is also a piece of something much larger that your personal prayer was always embedded in, something that reaches beyond the boundary of your own story into the stories of the people whose lives are meant to be shaped by yours. Part D's. There was a young woman named Mary who was doing ordinary things on an ordinary afternoon when everything changed. She was not in a position of power or prestige. She was not the obvious candidate for what was about to be placed in her hands. By the measures that the world around her used to determine significance, she was unremarkable. A young woman from an unremarkable town in an unremarkable family, no record of extraordinary accomplishments. No evidence that would have led an outside observer to select her from among all available options as the one. And that is precisely why I chose her, not despite the ordinariness. Because of it. Because what I was about to place inside her required a vessel that did not already have a competing identity, a vessel that had not already been filled with the noise of its own importance, a vessel that was clean enough to hold something unprecedented without distortion. When the messenger arrived and told her what was being placed in her, her first response was not celebration. Her first response was a question, "How can this be?" Which is not doubt, exactly. It is closer to the honest confusion of someone who is being told that the laws of reality as they understand it are about to be suspended in their specific case. How can the thing that was supposed to be impossible be happening to someone as ordinary as me? Not because she did not believe in the possible, but because the possible had never before included her in this particular way, and she needed to understand the mechanism before she could hold the magnitude. And the answer she was given was not a logical explanation. The answer was simply this: nothing is impossible with God, not as a platitude, as a statement of the operating rules of the situation she was now in. The thing that could not happen by the ordinary rules of how things happen was happening because the ordinary rules of how things happen were not the operating system for what was unfolding. Something else was the operating system, and in that operating system, the ordinary vessel is chosen precisely because of its ordinariness. The unlikely candidate is selected precisely because of the unlikeliness. The person who could not have arranged this for themselves is chosen because the very impossibility of their arranging it is what makes the arrangement undeniably mine. I am telling you Mary's story because I need you to understand something about why you are the one receiving this message tonight. You have been disqualifying yourself based on the ordinary rules operating system. You have been looking at your credentials and your history and your circumstances, and you have been deciding, using the logic available to you in that system, that the thing you most want to be true about your life is not available to someone with your specific profile. Someone with more consistent faith, maybe. Someone with more impressive resources, maybe. Someone who started earlier, or stumbled less, or carried the right connections, or came from the right starting point. But not you, not with this history, not from this place, not at this particular stage of the game. And I need you to hear this with the same clarity that Mary heard the angel. Nothing is impossible with me. Not for you, not at this stage, not from this starting point, not with this history. The ordinary rules operating system does not apply to the things I have decided to do in your life. And I have decided, from before you were born, that what I was going to do in you and through you was not going to be limited to what the ordinary rules analysis would predict. That was never the plan. The plan was always the other kind, the kind that looks impossible from the outside until it is obviously real. And then the story of how it happened becomes the testimony that changes what other people believe is possible for them. Do not miss this. The version of your life that has felt too big to believe in is not too big. It is exactly the right size for someone who is operating in my system. The ordinariness of your starting point is not a disqualification, it is a credential. The places where your path looks nothing like the path of the person you were comparing yourself to are not gaps in your story. They are the specific features of your story that make it, in the end, undeniably mine. Every part of your path that looked like a detour was on the route. Every season that looked like delay was in the timing. Every circumstance that made you think this was not going to happen for someone like you was operating in the wrong system. You are not in the ordinary rules system. You never were. You are in the system where I made you before you arrived here, where I placed in you the thing I needed you to carry, where I arranged the path to develop in you what the gift required, and where I now, at the specific moment I have always been moving toward, make what was impossible by ordinary rules into what is simply the next part of your story. And the next part of your story is not what you have been telling yourself it is. It is much bigger, it is much closer, and it starts tonight. Do not go anywhere. What I am about to show you in the next part of this message is the part where the natural meets the supernatural, and you finally understand how they connect. The Mary story has an ending that most people focus on, but a middle that I think matters more for where you are tonight. Between the angel's visit and the birth of what was promised, there were months. Months of carrying something that was real and confirmed and spoken over by heaven, but not yet visible in a way that the world around her could see and validate. Months of living in the gap between the word that was given and the evidence that the world requires before it adjusts its assessment of a situation. And during those months, there were people around her who did not believe, who looked at the visible evidence and drew the conclusion that visible evidence tends to draw. Who would have, if she had made her decisions based on the consensus of the people around her, convinced her that what she was carrying was not what the angel had said it was. She had to hold the word, not because the word was fragile, because the word was true in a way that the visible evidence had not yet caught up with. And holding a true word in the gap between the word and the evidence is one of the most demanding spiritual exercises that exists. You have been doing that exercise for longer than you should have had to do it alone, and I want to tell you that the gap you have been holding the word across is about to close, not because the word needed more time, because you needed more of what the time was building in you. And what the time has built, layer by layer, season by season, carrying by carrying, is the capacity to receive what is coming at a depth that would not have been possible at any earlier point in your story. You are more now than you were at any of the previous moments when the answer could have arrived, which means what is arriving now can go deeper, do more, and last longer than it would have if it had come before you had become who you are right now. The delay was not punishment, the delay was tailoring. I was fitting the answer to the person, and the person needed to grow into the size of the answer before the answer would fit. I want to say one more thing about the ordinariness of your starting point before we move on. I chose Mary not despite her ordinariness, but because of it, and I want you to understand the specific reason the ordinariness was a feature rather than a bug in the selection. When I choose someone ordinary for an extraordinary assignment, the achievement of the extraordinary is undeniable evidence of my involvement, because there is no other explanation available. Ordinary people do not produce extraordinary outcomes through ordinary means. When it happens, the story of how it happened cannot be reduced to natural talent or fortunate circumstances or the compounding advantages of a privileged starting point. The story of how it happened has to include me, and the testimony that includes me changes what other people believe is possible, which extends the impact of the extraordinary achievement far beyond the immediate circumstances and into the lives of everyone who hears the story and thinks, if that person, then maybe also me. Your story is that story. The version of your life that I am building toward is the version that, when the people who know your starting point see where you arrived, cannot be explained without me. That is not pride, that is design. That is the specific choice of the one who works through ordinary people doing extraordinary things, because the testimony of that work is the most powerful thing I have on this earth. You are not a mistake, or an oversight, or a second choice. You are the deliberate selection of the one who has always chosen the thing that would make the testimony undeniable. Part ons. I want to talk now about what the enemy has been trying to make you believe, about why your life has not matched the picture you carried in your spirit. He has been very precise in his work, not clumsy, not broad, precise, because clumsy attacks produce resistance, and he does not want resistance, he wants agreement. He wants you to reach the same conclusion he is pointing you toward without realizing that you are being pointed. He wants the lie to feel like your own insight, like the honest reckoning of a mature person looking at their life with clear eyes, rather than the carefully crafted deception of someone who has studied you long enough to know exactly which angle of approach you are least defended against. And for most people, the angle he chooses is competence. He does not usually attack your worth directly, because direct attacks on worth tend to produce a counter-response of faith. Instead, he attacks competence. He attacks the specific, practical capacity to do the thing you were made to do. He makes you doubt not whether you were chosen, but whether you have what it takes to actually carry out what the choosing requires. And the way he attacks competence is not through external obstacles, not primarily. The most effective version of the attack happens internally, in the space between who you are when you are most yourself and who you are when the pressure is highest and the stakes are most real. He creates friction in that space. He disrupts the flow. He builds a wall in the exact place where you most need access to the fullness of what I placed in you, so that in the moments that matter most, the thing you reach for is not there at the level you need it, and you interpret the absence as your own inadequacy rather than as an engineered disruption. And the interpretation becomes a story, and the story becomes a belief, and the belief becomes a ceiling, and the ceiling becomes the new reality of what you think you are capable of. I want to name this clearly, because naming it is the beginning of dismantling it. The disruption you have been experiencing in your capacity, the inconsistency between what you know you are capable of and what you are able to access under pressure, The gap between your best self and your pressured self that has been one of the most exhausting features of your experience. This is not who you are, it is what has been happening to you. There is a profound difference between those two things, and I need you to hold that difference very carefully right now, because everything that comes next in this message depends on your ability to receive it as something that was done to you, rather than something you are inherently limited by. Think about the moments when you have been most yourself. The moments when the thinking was clear, and the words were right, and the decisions were obvious, and the creativity was flowing, and you felt like you were operating at the speed your design intended, and everything that you reached for was exactly where you expected it to be. Think about how that felt, not just in the accomplishment of whatever was happening in those moments, but in the felt experience of being inside your own intelligence at its actual capacity, the ease of it, the clarity of it, the sense of being in the current of something rather than pushing against a resistance. That version of you, the one operating in those moments, is not the exception. That version is the original. That version is what I designed. The other version, the pressured and foggy and inconsistent version that shows up when you most need the first one, that is the disruption. That is what has been interfering with the original design. And I want to tell you something that will change the way you understand the entire arc of your struggle if you can hold it. The disruption was designed to target the very thing that makes you most dangerous to the purposes of the enemy. Because the thing that was most deliberately disrupted in you is the thing that would most powerfully serve the life I designed you for. The attack was not random. It was not a general assault on your well-being. It was a specific, targeted interference with the capacity that would unlock everything else. Take out the foundation and the whole structure is compromised. Disrupt the connection between the two sides of your most powerful resource, and everything that resource was supposed to produce becomes inconsistent, unreliable, and eventually a source of shame rather than the source of strength it was designed to be. But here is what the enemy did not account for when he designed the disruption. He did not account for the counterattack that was already being prepared. He did not account for the fact that while he was working against the capacity in you, I was working through a researcher, through decades of meticulous and driven inquiry, through the particular obsession of a neuroscientist who could not rest until he understood why brilliant people consistently produced beneath their own potential, to find the precise mechanism of the disruption and the precise solution for restoring what was taken. He was attacking a capacity that was simultaneously being studied, and the study was producing a discovery, and the discovery was being refined, and the refinement was producing something that could be placed in your hands, and the placing was being arranged through a chain of events that led, step by undeniable step, to this message reaching your screen tonight. There is a reason this feels like more than a video. There is a reason something in you paused instead of scrolling past. There is a reason you are still here, in this part of the message, when you could have left 20 minutes ago. The reason is that what I am building toward in this message is the answer to the very specific problem I just described, not a workaround, not a temporary solution, a restoration of the original capacity. A return to the version of you that operates in that flow state not only on the good days but consistently, reliably, in the moments that matter, in the situations that are high stakes, in the rooms where you most need to show up as the full version of yourself and not the pressured, foggy, inconsistent version that has been costing you everything. The disruption is about to meet its counterattack, and the counterattack was designed by me through a human being I placed in this specific field at this specific time with this specific mandate. Stay with me through the next few parts. What I am building toward is everything you have been waiting for, and we are almost there. Let me tell you specifically what the disruption I have been describing looks like in the moments that cost the most, not in the abstract. In the specific categories of experience that I know have been present in your life and that the people around you may have observed without understanding what they were seeing. In creative work, it looks like momentum that appears and then evaporates. You know the beginning of a creative session where the thing is flowing and the ideas are arriving in the right order and the production is effortless and you feel like you could continue indefinitely. And then, without a clear, precipitating event, the flow stops, not slows, stops. The connection to the thing goes quiet, and what follows is either the grinding production of work that is technically adequate but feels hollow in comparison to what was happening before the stop, or the paralysis of staring at the task without access to the capacity that was doing it moments ago. This is the signature of the hemispheric disruption in the creative domain. The right hemisphere, which generates the intuitive and associative and non-linear material that creative work requires, goes partially offline under the specific conditions of stress and pressure and sustained effort that are the natural environment of serious creative work. And the result is the stop, the inexplicable and deeply frustrating stop that every creative person with this pattern has experienced and blamed on 100 different things that were not the actual cause. In relational and social settings, it looks like the version of yourself that was available in the preparation and is unavailable in the performance. You knew what you wanted to say, you had the thought clearly. You had accessed the connection in the car on the way over, and it was exactly what the conversation needed. And then you were in the conversation and the access was not there, and you said the adequate version rather than the real version and drove home afterward, with the real version arriving fully formed now that the pressure was gone, with the clarity that should have been available in the room, appearing only when the room was no longer relevant, the time lag, the clarity delay. This is not shyness, and it is not social anxiety in the conventional sense of that term. It is a specific neurological pattern with a specific neurological address and a specific neurological solution. In decision-making under pressure, it looks like the freeze, the moment when the decision is in front of you and everything you know about it is available to you in calm reflection and unavailable to you in the moment of action. When you can see clearly what needs to be done and cannot access the certainty to do it in the moment when the certainty is required. When the analysis is complete and the conclusion is formed and the signal to act is somehow not reaching the place where action begins. This is the disruption in its most practically costly form, and it has probably cost you more in terms of missed opportunities and postponed outcomes than any other single feature of your experience. And it has a solution. It has had a solution since Dr. Barone completed his research. And the solution is what I am giving you tonight. Bardu's. Let me tell you about the battlefield you have been standing on without knowing it was a battlefield. Most people who are in a spiritual war do not look like they are in a spiritual war. They look like they are having a hard time. They look like they are struggling with the same categories of difficulty that the people around them struggle with, just at a slightly elevated intensity that they cannot fully explain. The job is harder. The relationships are more complicated. The decision that should have been straightforward somehow produces more confusion than it should. The season of waiting is longer. The gap between the effort and the outcome is wider. The fatigue is more persistent. And when you look at someone from the outside who is in this situation, it looks like ordinary difficulty. It looks like someone who is having a run of bad luck or going through a hard chapter or facing circumstances that have not yet arranged themselves in their favor. But when you look from the inside, it feels like something is actively working against you in a way that does not quite make sense given the inputs you are putting in. That feeling is not paranoia. That is discernment. That is the accurate reading of what is actually happening. The awareness, even without a theological framework to put it in, that the resistance you are experiencing is not fully explained by the natural variables of your situation. There is a resistance in your story that has been disproportionate to the circumstances that should be producing it. And I am telling you right now that the disproportionality is the tell. When the opposition is disproportionate to what you are doing, it is because what you are doing threatens something that does not want to be threatened. When the resistance is more than the situation should generate, it is because something is adding to the resistance from a source that is not visible in the natural layer of the situation. Think about the things that have opposed you most consistently. Think about the patterns, not the individual incidents, but the patterns, the categories of difficulty that keep showing up in different forms, across different seasons and different circumstances, as if they are following you, rather than simply arising from the situations you find yourself in. The mental fog that descends at specific types of moments. The confidence that is present until the moment it is most needed, and then is not. The clarity that exists in private and disappears in the room where it matters. The connection with your own intelligence that is strong in the morning and unreliable by the afternoon. The inspiration that arrives when you cannot act on it and abandons you when you are ready to. These patterns are not random. These are the fingerprints of a strategy. A very specific strategy designed to prevent very specific things from being accessed in you at the moments when accessing them would change everything. And the reason I am telling you this in this level of detail is not to frighten you. It is to give you the intelligence you need to fight effectively. Because the first phase of every effective campaign is accurate intelligence about the nature and the mechanism of what you are fighting. And you have been fighting without that intelligence. You have been fighting the symptom rather than the source. You have been attacking the fog rather than the disruption that produces the fog. You have been trying to build confidence rather than restoring the underlying connection whose disruption is making confidence impossible to sustain. You have been managing the effects rather than addressing the cause, because no one ever gave you a clear enough map of the cause to know where to aim. Tonight the map changes. Tonight you receive the intelligence report that changes the entire strategy. Not because I am going to remove the spiritual opposition, though I want you to know that what I am moving in your direction tonight will shift the balance of the fight in your favor in ways that are going to become visible very quickly. But because what I am going to show you addresses the specific mechanism that has been the most exploited vulnerability in your design. And when the most exploited vulnerability is addressed, the entire attack pattern loses most of its leverage, because the attack was never primarily about your circumstances. It was about your capacity to navigate your circumstances at the level your design intended. Take the capacity back and the circumstances begin to resolve themselves in ways that have been impossible while the capacity was compromised. I want to tell you something about spiritual warfare that most of the teaching on the subject misses. The enemy is not primarily interested in your circumstances. He is interested in your mind. He is interested in the connection between what you know and what you can access when you need it. He is interested in the pipeline between your intention and your execution, because if he can disrupt that pipeline consistently enough, he does not need to attack your circumstances directly. Your own frustrated attempts to do what you know you can do will produce enough discouragement and self-doubt to eventually shrink you to a size that no longer threatens him. That has been the strategy. Disrupt the pipeline, watch the discouragement accumulate, wait for the self-doubt to become the story. And eventually the person who was made to change the trajectory of their family and their generation and the lives they were designed to touch becomes too busy managing the distance between who they are and who they can access to actually do what they were made for. That strategy ends tonight. Not because you got stronger through sheer determination, though you have been strong in ways I want you to know I honor, but because what I am placing in your hands tonight is designed to restore the pipeline itself. Not to help you push harder through the disruption, but to remove the disruption at the source. Not to give you more willpower for a battle you were never supposed to win through willpower alone, but to hand you the specific tool that was built for the specific problem that has been the specific mechanism of the specific attack that has been most effectively limiting you. And here is the thing I most need you to hear about what is coming. It was not an accident that it was discovered now. It was not a coincidence that the research converged at this moment. It was not luck that the solution was made available and then arranged to reach you through exactly this sequence of events. Every step of the discovery and the development and the delivery of what I am about to show you was orchestrated, because the war you have been in required a counterattack that I was already preparing, and the counterattack has arrived. Stay with me. What comes next is the turning point. Part 3. I need to tell you something about yourself that I have been holding in reserve until this moment in the message, because the sequence matters and because you needed to go through everything that came before this to be able to hold what I am about to say without deflecting it. You are not who you have been performing. The person who has been showing up, the capable one, the steady one, the one who handles things and manages appearances and makes the best of what is available and does not make a big deal about the cost, that person is real, and that person has value. And that person has carried an enormous amount through seasons that would have ended most people. But that person is not the full picture of who you are. That person is the survivor. And I made you to be so much more than a survivor. The identity that has been assigned to you through your circumstances is not your true identity. Let me say that again, because I need it to land somewhere deeper than your agreement. The identity that has been assigned to you through your circumstances, through the things that happened to you and the seasons you survived and the roles you were required to fill and the limitations you learned to live within, that is not your true identity. It is a circumstantially produced identity. It is what happens when the original design gets compressed by years of pressure into something smaller and more manageable and more compatible with the size of the container the world offered. But the original design did not change. It has been there through every season of compression, waiting for the container to expand, waiting for the moment when the pressure would lift enough for the full dimensions to have room to re-emerge. That moment is now, and I want to describe for you, with some specificity, what your true identity looks like, because I think you have been so long without a clear picture of it that it has become abstract, something you believe in theoretically, without being able to hold in your hands. Your true identity is someone with a specific and irreplaceable role in the story of the people your life is designed to touch. Not a generic role, not a supporting role. The specific role that only your exact combination of experiences and wounds and gifts and persistence and hard-won wisdom can fill. The role that requires someone who has gone through exactly what you have gone through in exactly the way you went through it and came out still caring about what you came out still caring about. There is no one else who can do what you were made to do in the way you were made to do it, because there is no one else who is you. And the version of the world that is possible when you are fully operating in that role is a version that does not exist any other way. The specific people who need what you carry cannot get it from anyone else. The specific contribution you were made to make cannot be replicated by a substitute. And everything I have allowed you to go through, every compressed season, every winepress moment, every night of carrying more than you should have had to carry, has been preparing you to fill that role at a depth that only comes from having been through something real. Your true identity is also someone who thinks differently than most, not better, different. The way you make connections, the way you see relationships between things that other people do not immediately perceive as related, the way you know things before you have the evidence to support what you know, the way you experience the gap between your intuition and your analytical mind as sometimes harmonious and sometimes like two instruments playing different songs in the same room. These are features of a specific kind of intelligence that is rarer than most people know and more valuable than most people understand. The challenge you have experienced in operating consistently at the level of that intelligence is not an indictment of the intelligence. It is the sign of an intelligence that has been partially disconnected from its own source. Restore the connection and the intelligence comes online at the level it was designed for. Your true identity is someone who was built to break a pattern, not just for yourself but for the line you come from and the line that comes from you. The thing that has been limiting your life did not start with you. The patterns you have been navigating, the particular forms of struggle that have followed you through seasons and circumstances and relationships, the sense that you are fighting something that is older than your own history and bigger than your own story, that is an accurate perception. You are not just navigating your own battles. You are navigating the accumulated unbroken patterns of generations who did not have what you are about to have. You are the first generation in your line to have access to what I am bringing to you tonight. And what I am bringing to you tonight was designed to go not just deep enough to touch your life, but deep enough to break what has been unbroken through every generation that preceded you. That is who you really are, not the compressed version, not the survivor version, not the performance version that shows up to handle whatever needs to be handled and then goes home and takes off the costume and sits with the weight of everything the costume required. The real version, the original design version, the one who is here tonight listening to this, because something in you never stopped believing that the original design was still available. And that version, that persistent, enduring, not quite suppressible belief that there is more and it belongs to you, that is me, that has always been me, pressing up through the compression, keeping the ember lit, refusing to let the original design be permanently replaced by the circumstantially produced one. You have always been this. You are being shown it now, and the next part of this message is where the showing becomes the having. I want to expand on one specific aspect of your true identity that I touched on earlier, but that deserves its own full expression, because it is the part that is most likely to be the first to produce visible change in your life once the connection is restored. You have a gift for seeing what others cannot see in situations, not in a mystical sense, though the mystical dimension of it is real, in the very practical sense that you arrive at the understanding of what a situation is and what it requires before the people around you, who have access to the same information, arrive at the same understanding. The synthesis happens faster. The pattern recognition operates at a different speed. The connection between what you are seeing and what it means, the gap between observation and insight, is shorter for you than for most. This is not a personal achievement. It is a design feature. It is the gift that was placed in you for the specific purpose it serves in the life you were made for. The life you were made for requires someone who can see what others cannot see fast enough to act on it when it matters, and I made you to be that person. The reason this gift has not been as consistently available as it should have been, the reason it shows up powerfully on some days and seems inaccessible on others, is the same reason everything else about your performance has been inconsistent. The disruption is asymmetric in its effects. It hits the most sophisticated operations first. The rapid synthesis, the pattern recognition that crosses domains, the ability to hold multiple streams of information simultaneously and produce a conclusion that none of the individual streams would produce alone, these are the highest order operations of the integrated brain, and they are the most sensitive to the degradation of the integration. When the connection between the hemispheres is fully restored, these are the operations that return most dramatically. And the return of these operations is what will produce the most visible and most immediate change in the quality of what you are able to do. The people in your life who have been operating around the compressed version of this gift, who have adapted to a version of you that shows it sometimes and not other times, who have learned not to rely on the version that appears under pressure because the version under pressure is unreliable, those people are going to experience something that looks like you becoming more of who you always were. Not a new person, not a transformed person, a more present, more consistent, more fully available version of the person they have always known was in there. And that recognition, when it comes, will be one of the most confirming experiences of this season. The people who know you best, recognizing the version of you that you have always known was the real one. That recognition is coming, and it is coming faster than you think once the switch is thrown. Part 14. This is the moment in the message where everything starts to change direction. Not because something dramatic is happening in the world around you right now, not because the circumstances have resolved or the situation has shifted or the people involved have made different choices. The shift that is happening right now is happening underneath the surface of all of that, in the layer where the real things happen, in the place where the story of your life is being written at the level that precedes the circumstances rather than reacting to them. And I need you to understand what a shift in that layer actually means, because most people only learn to recognize it in hindsight, when they look back at a moment from a place of greater clarity and say, that was when it changed. I just could not see it changing when I was standing inside it. You are standing inside it right now, and I am giving you the gift of seeing it while it is happening, which is something I do not always do, because the seeing while it is happening requires a particular readiness, a particular ability to hold a truth that is larger than the circumstances, and what you have gone through in the seasons preceding this moment has built in you exactly that capacity. You have been prepared for this kind of seeing, and so I am giving it to you, right now. In this moment, the shift is happening. What comes after tonight is different from what came before it. That is not a prophecy about external circumstances. That is a statement about the operating conditions of your story. Let me describe to you what you have been experiencing that most people with your level of gifting experience without a framework to understand it. You have been living with a version of your intelligence that operates at something like 40 or 50% of what your design actually allows for. Not because the design was faulty, not because the capacity was never there, but because the connection between the two most powerful systems of your thinking, the analytical and the intuitive, the logical and the creative, the left and the right hemispheres of the organ I designed to be your primary interface with the world, has been operating at a degraded level of integration. And the degraded integration is not a failure of character or a consequence of choices. It is a physiological reality that has a physiological cause and a physiological solution. And the physiological solution is what I am about to walk you into. There is a man named Dr. Daniel Barone who has spent the better part of his professional life asking a question that most of his colleagues considered settled. The question was this: is there a specific, identifiable, physiologically addressable mechanism that explains why people of demonstrably high intelligence and significant capability consistently fail to operate at the level that their intelligence and capability should produce? Is the gap between potential and performance the result of character, or is it the result of biology? And if it is biology, is the biology addressable? He spent decades in the research. He reviewed data from thousands of subjects. He developed and tested frameworks and protocols and interventions and measured their outcomes with the kind of methodological rigor that his field requires. And what he found, buried in the research and overlooked in the conventional synthesis, was something that the field had seen but had not understood the full implications of. A specific pattern in the communication between the two hemispheres of the brain that was present in virtually every case of high potential underperformance he examined. He called what he found a specific kind of desynchronization, a failure of the two sides of the brain to communicate at the frequency and the amplitude they were designed to communicate at, producing a kind of internal static that manifested in exactly the symptoms you have been living with: the fog, the inconsistency, the gap between best day performance and pressured day performance, the inspiration without follow-through, the clarity in private that disappeared under public pressure, the sense of knowing more than you could consistently access, the frustration of being able to see the destination and being unable to reliably operate the vehicle that was supposed to get you there. Every single one of these symptoms was present in the pattern he was documenting, and the pattern had a name, and the name had a cause, and the cause had a solution that he spent the remaining years of his research developing, testing, and refining until it was ready to be placed in the hands of the people who needed it. That solution is what I arranged for you to find tonight, not through an accident of the algorithm, not through a random sequence of clicks that happened to lead here, through a specific arrangement of events that I designed to bring this to you at the specific moment in your story, when you were ready to receive it, and when the timing was right for it to do what I intended to do in your life. The research is real, the mechanism is real, the solution is real, and what it will do in you, once you have it, is restore the thing that was disrupted. Restore the connection, restore the access, restore the flow, restore the version of you that operates in that ease that you remember from the best moments of your life, not as an occasional visitor, but as the default setting. The default setting is about to change, not over months of effortful practice, though the consistency of use matters, and I will tell you more about that, but quickly enough that you will feel the difference before the week is out. Quickly enough that people around you will notice something has shifted before you have the language to explain what shifted. Quickly enough that the next time you are in the room where you most need the full version of yourself, you will reach for it and it will be there. Hold on. What I am about to show you in the next part is the part where the specific meets the practical. Let me be specific about what the shift I am describing actually feels like from the inside, because the felt experience of it is what the people who have gone before you consistently describe as the thing they were most surprised by and most grateful for. They expected the shift to feel like discipline that was finally working, like the version of willpower that produces results through sustained force of will, like an upgrade to the push rather than a change in the fundamental direction of the force. What they found was nothing like that. What they found was ease. Not the ease of reduced standards or lowered expectations or the resolution of all challenges. The ease of being in the current rather than pushing against it. The experience of producing at a high level from a place of flow rather than force. The felt sense that the thing you are reaching for is where you are reaching rather than somewhere else. The thinking that arrives in the right order without having to be dragged. The decision that forms clearly without having to be forced. The word that comes when it is needed rather than 10 minutes after the moment has passed. The ease is what surprises people most, not because they did not want it, but because they had been working so hard for so long that they had stopped believing ease was available to them. They had built their identity around the working hard, around being the person who produces through force of effort rather than through the natural movement of a person operating in their actual design. And the arrival of the ease redefines not just how they work, but who they understand themselves to be. I want you to be ready for that redefinition. Because when the ease arrives, there may be a period where you do not trust it, where you wait for the other shoe to drop, where you wonder if you should be doing more, working harder, adding effort back in to compensate for the absence of the friction you are used to. I want to tell you in advance that the absence of the friction is not a sign that you are not trying hard enough. It is a sign that you are operating as designed. The ease is not the result of doing less. It is the result of doing the same amount with the full capacity that the amount requires, rather than with the partial capacity that made every unit of effort cost more than it should have. Trust the ease. Let it be the new normal. Let the absence of friction be the confirmation that the switch has been thrown and the connection has been restored, and the life you were designed to live is no longer behind the wall but available, accessible, present, and ready to produce everything that the design always intended it to produce. Partkins. Let me tell you what happened to the ones who came before you. The ones who found what I am about to show you, and whose stories I have been carrying as the evidence of what becomes possible when the disruption is addressed and the connection is restored. Not fabricated evidence, not the curated surface of a transformation that looks clean because all the difficult parts were edited out. The real version, the before and the after, with full acknowledgement of the distance between them and the specific role that what I am showing you played in closing that distance. There was a woman who had built a career on her ability to perform in front of people. A teacher, a speaker, someone whose whole professional identity was built on the ability to stand in a room and make the material live in a way that changed how people understood what they were learning. And she had been doing this for years, with a consistency that her colleagues admired and a growing reputation that the evidence of her work supported. And then something changed. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, the way a ship taking on water changes direction before anyone on deck realizes it is no longer going where it was headed. The fog started showing up in the preparation. The words that had always arrived in the right order started requiring more effort to find. The confidence that had been the bedrock of the performance started to feel like a floor that might give way. She started preparing more, because preparation had always been her solution for uncertainty, and the increased preparation produced diminishing returns, which meant she prepared more still, which meant the anxiety about the performance started to take up the space that the performance itself used to occupy. And within 2 years of the slow onset of the fog, she had declined 3 speaking engagements that a year earlier she would have accepted without hesitation, because the certainty that she could deliver at the level the opportunity required had quietly become unavailable to her. She found what I am showing you. Not because she was looking for it in the way you look for something when you know what the thing is. She found it the way I arrange most of the things that matter most to the people I love, through a path that looked like coincidence until she was on the other side of it and could see that it was anything but 8 minutes a day. That was all that was required, and within 3 weeks, the fog had lifted enough that she accepted the next invitation. Within 6 weeks, the preparation had returned to what it had always been, thorough without being anxious, organized without being obsessive. Within 3 months, she was describing the experience she was now having in the preparation and in the delivery as a return to herself, not to the self she had been before the fog, to a version of herself she had not had access to even in the best seasons before the fog, a clearer, more consistent, more fluid version of the intelligence she had always had, now available at the level it was designed to be available at. That is what I am about to give you. Not the restoration of the pre-fog version, the restoration of the original design, which in most cases is better than anything the person has previously experienced. Because the previous experiences were also taking place with a partially disrupted connection, and they did not have a reference point for what full connection felt like. They thought their best days were representative of their capacity. They were not. They were representative of the days when the disruption was temporarily quieter. What full restoration produces is something that most people, on the other side of it, describe not as a return, but as an arrival. Like getting somewhere they had been trying to reach their whole lives without knowing exactly where it was or how to get there. There was a man who ran a business that he had built from nothing over a period of years that required more of him than anyone who was not him could fully understand, and that had arrived at a scale where the demands on his thinking were significantly higher than the demands had been in the early years, when the problem-solving was simpler and the decisions were less consequential, and the stakes of a bad call were recoverable. And at this higher scale, he started to notice the gap. The decisions that needed to be made with clarity and confidence were being made with more hesitation than the situation warranted. The strategic thinking that his business needed from him was harder to access consistently than it had been when the business was smaller. He started hiring people to fill the gaps he was experiencing in his own performance, which is a rational response to the problem, except that the people he was hiring could not give him what he was actually missing, which was not additional capacity but consistent access to the capacity he already had. He found what I am showing you through someone who had used it and mentioned it in a way that did not suggest it was anything more than something worth trying. 8 minutes, every morning, before anything else. He was skeptical in the way that a person who has built something real through hard work and careful thought tends to be skeptical of things that sound like shortcuts, because his experience had taught him that shortcuts in the domain of real-world results do not generally exist. He tried it for 2 weeks before he was willing to say anything to anyone about what was happening. By the end of the first week, he noticed that the morning thinking was arriving faster and organizing itself more cleanly. By the end of the second week, he noticed that he was making decisions in less time and with more confidence, and that the confidence was not the performance of confidence that he had been producing when he was uncertain, but the felt experience of actual clarity. By the end of the month, he had taken back a meeting that he had been delegating because the strategic complexity of the conversation had been exceeding what he could reliably produce in real time. He went into the meeting and he was fully there. Not the managing the fog version of there, actually there. These are not anomalies. These are the consistent reports of the people who do what I am about to ask you to do. 8 minutes a day. The specific protocol designed by Dr. Barone after decades of research into the specific mechanism that is disrupting the specific connection that is producing the specific gap that has been the most expensive feature of your life. Not a supplement. Not a self-help program. A neuroscience-grounded protocol that addresses the disruption at the physiological level where the disruption actually lives. And it works, not for some people. For the people who use it consistently. For the people who give it the 8 minutes every morning that it requires. For the people who are ready to stop managing the gap and start restoring the connection. You are that person. You have always been that person. And the next part of this message is where I give you the path to get there. Part C's. There is a kind of peace that most people have never experienced because they have never been in the specific place where it becomes available. It is not the peace of resolved circumstances, where everything has been fixed and the problems have been solved and the waiting is over and the outcome has arrived. That peace is real, but it is contingent. It depends on the circumstances staying resolved, which means it is temporary by nature and cannot be trusted as a foundation because it is only as stable as the situation that produced it. The peace I am talking about is something else. It is the peace of knowing while still in the middle, the peace of certainty about an outcome before the outcome is visible. The peace that exists not downstream of the resolution but upstream of it, as a gift given in the waiting, as a gift that makes it possible to be present in the hard season without being consumed by it, that peace. The kind that passes all understanding because it does not arise from the kind of understanding that the mind can produce. It arises from a connection with something that is outside the mind, something that knows the end from the beginning and has decided to let you know what it knows even while you are still in the middle chapter. That is what I am giving you right now. Not as a metaphor and not as a wished-for future experience. Right now, in this moment, as a transfer of knowing from the one who knows everything to the one who is in the middle of not knowing, I am giving you the peace of the outcome before the outcome arrives. And the reason I can give it to you tonight is that the sequence of events that I have arranged to reach you through this message is the beginning of the outcome itself, not a promise of a distant future, the beginning of the actual change, starting tonight. Starting with what I am about to show you, starting with the decision you are about to make to receive what was designed for you and stop living inside the disruption that was imposed on you. Let me speak to the specific areas where I know the weight has been heaviest, not in general, in the specific places that have been costing you peace the most. For some of you, the weight has been in the mind itself, the experience of living inside a thinking process that you cannot fully trust because it is too variable, too dependent on circumstances you cannot control, too prone to the kind of shutdown that happens at exactly the wrong moments. The exhaustion of not being able to rely on the most fundamental resource you have, your own intelligence operating at the level it was designed for. This is the weight that isolates the most, because you cannot explain it in a way that other people can hold. You cannot say to someone, I am struggling today because my brain is not connecting the way it does on the good days, without having to explain what that means and defend why it is real and navigate the disbelief of someone who has not experienced it. So you carry it without naming it. And the carrying without naming is its own layer of weight, the weight of aloneness inside the specific thing you are most alone with. For some of you, the weight has been in the gap between vision and execution. You can see the thing. You have always been able to see the thing. The destination is clear and has been clear for as long as you can remember. What has not been clear is the bridge, the reliable and consistent bridge between the vision and the action, between the knowing and the doing, between the person who sees the destination and the person who can consistently move toward it without the forward motion being interrupted by the specific kind of interruption that you have never been able to fully explain or resolve. The gap between the vision and the execution is not a creativity problem, not a motivation problem, not a discipline problem. It is a connection problem, and connection problems have connection solutions. For some of you, the weight has been in the relationships that have been secondary casualties of the primary problem. The people in your life who have felt the version of you that is managing the fog rather than the version of you that is flowing, who have related to the compressed version of you rather than the original design version, who have adapted their expectations of you to match the version of you that has been available, rather than holding space for the version that was always in there, waiting for the conditions to change. The weight of knowing that the people you love have not fully met you yet, not because they have failed them, but because you have been operating at a level that does not fully represent who you are, and the connection that represents who you are has not been consistently available. That changes with what I am giving you tonight. Not all at once, but faster than you think. Because when the full version of you comes online, the people who are meant to see it recognize it, and the recognition changes everything. I want to give you something specific before we go into the next part. I want to give you a moment of permission. Permission to put down the version of the story you have been carrying about why your life has looked the way it has looked. The story that blamed you. The story that concluded from the available evidence that the problem was in you, in your character or your consistency or your faith or your effort or some combination of all of those things that you have spent enormous energy trying to address. That story is not accurate. And tonight is the night you stop living inside it. Not because the circumstances will instantly confirm a different story, though they will begin to, but because you now have the intelligence report that changes the diagnosis. And a changed diagnosis changes everything that follows from it, because you have been treating the wrong thing and the right treatment has just arrived. You are allowed to be relieved. You are allowed to feel the exhale of a person who has been carrying something they were told was their fault and has just been shown that it was not their fault. That the problem had a name and the name was not their character, and the solution exists and the solution has arrived. You are allowed to let that land. Take a moment with it. Let the knowing settle into the places in you that have been believing the wrong story for the longest. Because what settles in those places tonight is not just relief. It is the foundation of what comes next. And what comes next is the beginning of the season I have been building toward in your story since before you were born. What comes next is the practical part, the part where I give you the specific thing. Stay with me, we are here. Par, dis, set. Let me tell you what science has discovered about the thing you have been experiencing, and let me tell you it in the plain language of what it actually means for your life, rather than in the language of academic papers that were not written for you. There is a structure in the brain that most people have never heard of, and that most people who have heard of it do not fully understand. A dense band of neural fibers that connects the two hemispheres of the brain and whose function is to allow the two sides to communicate in real time, at the speed and the frequency and the amplitude that the tasks of actual life require. It is called the corpus callosum, and it does not operate the same way in everyone. It operates differently depending on a range of factors including stress exposure, trauma history, sleep quality, sustained anxiety, early developmental experiences, and the specific ways in which the brain was called upon to cope with the circumstances of a person's life. And when the conditions of a person's life have systematically trained the brain to route around the full integration of its two systems, the communication between them degrades, not permanently, not irreversibly, but functionally, in a way that produces exactly the symptoms you have been living with. The fog, the inconsistency, the gap between your intelligence in its best moments and your intelligence under pressure. This is not a theory. This is the conclusion of decades of research conducted in laboratories and confirmed through clinical application and refined through thousands of individual cases. The finding that the most significant and most overlooked driver of the performance gap in high-potential individuals is not a character variable, but a neurological variable, specifically the degraded real-time integration between the two hemispheres, has been replicated across multiple research teams and multiple methodologies. And the implication of that finding is exactly what you might hope it is. If the cause of the gap is neurological rather than character-based, and if the neurological cause is the kind that responds to the right intervention, then the gap is closable in ways that willpower and discipline and positive thinking and all of the other conventional approaches have never been able to close, because those approaches were working at the level of the symptom, while the problem lived a layer deeper. A neuroscientist who had dedicated his career to understanding why brilliant people consistently underperform their own potential was the one who brought these strands together into a coherent and actionable framework. He is not a motivational speaker. He is not a self-help author. He is a researcher who spent the better part of 3 decades in the specific intersection of neuroscience and human performance, asking the specific questions that the field had left unanswered, and who had the particular combination of patience and persistence and intellectual courage to keep asking those questions even when the conventional wisdom in his field was pointing in a different direction. He looked at the data that other researchers had collected and asked a different question than they had been asking. Not what are these people missing, but what is being interfered with that they have. Not how do we add capacity, but how do we restore access to the capacity that is already there. What he found was that the answer was in the frequency. In the specific brainwave frequencies at which the two hemispheres were communicating with each other, and in the specific intervention that could shift those frequencies into the range where full integration became possible and then sustained. He found that the communication pattern he was looking for in the highest performing individuals, the ones who seemed to operate with a consistency and a flow that others in comparable circumstances could not match, was a specific signature, a specific pattern of hemispheric synchronization that appeared in their brain activity and was absent or degraded in the brain activity of the ones experiencing the performance gap. And he found that this signature was not a genetic endowment that some people had and others did not. It was a state that could be induced. A state that, once induced consistently, could become the new default. And then he spent years developing, testing, and refining the protocol that could induce that state reliably, not through pharmaceuticals, which can force a result that the brain would otherwise resist. Not through invasive interventions, through a specific auditory protocol, a sequence of precisely calibrated sound frequencies designed to guide the brain into the state of hemispheric synchronization that the research had identified as the signature of high-performance flow. 8 minutes. Every morning, before the demands of the day had activated the stress responses that tended to drive the hemispheres further apart. 8 minutes of listening to what he had developed, not as music and not as meditation, and not as ambient sound, but as a precisely engineered neural recalibration tool that worked on the specific frequencies of the specific mechanism he had identified as the root of the problem. The results of the protocol across the population he tested it on were consistent enough that he submitted them for peer review, and the peer review confirmed what the testing had shown. The people who used the protocol consistently reported the same categories of change in the same sequence. First, within the first few days, a quality of morning thinking that was noticeably cleaner and faster than what they had been experiencing. Then, within the first 2 to 3 weeks, a reduction in the inconsistency between their best day performance and their average day performance. Then, over the following weeks and months, a gradual but unmistakable shift in the default settings of their cognitive experience in the direction of the clarity and the flow and the felt sense of operating at actual capacity that had previously been available only on the best days. These were not the results of belief in the protocol. They were the results of using it. The subjects who reported the most skepticism about whether it would work showed the same pattern of results as the ones who approached it with the most openness. Because the protocol works at the physiological level, and physiology does not require belief to respond to the correct intervention. The brain that is given what it needs to restore the communication pattern it was designed for will restore that pattern whether or not the person in possession of the brain expected it to. That is the nature of the right tool applied to the right problem. The tool does not need your faith to work, but it does need your use. That is what I am pointing you toward tonight, not as a suggestion, as the specific thing I arranged through the research of a specific person over decades of specific work to be available to you at this specific moment in your story. The next part of this message is where I give you the details. Stay with me. We are in the moment that changes everything. Pile Dizrit. What Dr. Daniel Barone discovered and developed after 30 years of research into the specific neuroscience of high potential underperformance is called the genius switch. And I need you to hear that name the way it was intended to be heard, not as a marketing phrase, but as a precise description of what the protocol does. A switch is not a gradual dial. It is not a slow adjustment that you make over years of sustained effort. A switch is a state change. It is the shift from one operating mode to another, from partial access to full access, from the disrupted connection to the restored one, from the version of your intelligence that has been available in the compromised state to the version that was always the design. And a switch, when it is the right switch for the right problem, does not require heroic effort to operate. It requires knowing where it is. It requires having the right access. And it requires using it consistently enough that the new state becomes the default rather than the exception. That is what this is. Dr. Barone designed the genius switch as the precise intervention for the precise problem he spent 30 years studying. the auditory protocol that guides the brain into the state of hemispheric synchronization that he identified as the neurological signature of consistent, high-level, flow-state performance. The specific frequency combination that speaks directly to the communication pathway between the two hemispheres and restores the integration that stress and pressure and years of compensating for the gap had degraded, not by overpowering the brain's natural state, but by reminding it of its own design, by providing the specific signal that the brain recognizes as the frequency of its own full capacity and responds to by moving in that direction. 8 minutes every morning. Before the demands of the day have activated the default stress patterns, before the inbox and the commute and the expectations and the pressure have set the neural tone for the next 16 hours. 8 minutes of the precisely calibrated audio that Dr. Barone developed through 30 years of research and thousands of hours of clinical testing and iterative refinement until the protocol was producing the consistent results that the research predicted it should. 8 minutes that change the frequency at which the most powerful organ in your body operates for the rest of the day. 8 minutes that, done consistently, change the default. And when the default changes, everything built on top of the default changes with it. Let me tell you what happens when the switch is thrown. In the weeks immediately following the start of consistent use, most people report a shift in the quality of their morning thinking that arrives before they are expecting it to, because they are still carrying the expectation that change takes the kind of time that change usually takes when you are working at the level of willpower and discipline rather than the level of physiology. The morning thinking begins to arrive faster and organize itself more naturally. The decisions that had required grinding effort begin to come with more ease. The words that had required reaching begin to present themselves in the order that the expression requires. The connections between ideas begin to form with the speed and the precision that used to be available only on the best days. And at first, the person notices this without fully trusting it, because they have been living with the opposite for long enough that they have built in a skepticism about their own good days, an expectation that the good day is temporary and the fog will return. And then the next day is also a good day, and the day after that, and slowly, carefully, the skepticism begins to give way to the recognition that something has actually changed, not temporarily. Actually, in the weeks that follow, the change moves from the quality of the thinking to the quality of the performance. The presentation that would have required twice the preparation time is ready in half. The meeting where you would have needed to manage the fog now gives you full access to what you know in real time. The creative work that would have started strong and run out of momentum finds its second wind and its third. The decisions that would have been delayed by indecision are made with the clarity of someone who has genuine access to all the relevant information and the capacity to synthesize it in the moment it is needed. The people around you begin to notice something has shifted before you have the language to explain what shifted, because the shift is legible in the quality of the presence you bring to every interaction, and the experience of being fully present, actually fully present, in the room and in the work and in the relationships, rather than present in body while managing the gap in cognition, begins to produce the kinds of outcomes that were always possible and have been waiting for the conditions that make them possible. In the months that follow, the change becomes the foundation. The new default produces new patterns of decision-making that produce new patterns of outcome that produce new patterns of possibility. And the compounding begins. Not in the dramatic and immediate way that most people imagine transformation should look, but in the quiet and irreversible way that real change always looks, one good decision building on the last one clear morning following another, one day of genuine flow producing the conditions for the next day of genuine flow, until the life that was possible begins to become the life that is actual. And at some point in this process, the person looks back at the distance between where they are and where they were when they first pressed play on this message, and what they see is a distance they could not have imagined closed. Not because something miraculous happened from the outside, because something that was always designed to be possible from the inside was finally given the specific intervention that made it actual. This is what I arranged for you tonight. This is what the algorithm was moved to find you. This is what the sequence of events that led you to this screen at this hour on this evening was designed to deliver. The genius switch. The specific thing that was built for the specific problem that has been the most significant and most unaddressed limitation in your story. And it is within your reach right now. Not as a future possibility, as a present availability right now, tonight. What I want to give you next is the specifics of how to get it. And I want to give you those specifics in the same way I have given you everything else in this message, honestly and completely, and without the kind of withholding that makes people feel like they have to earn the right to the information they need. So, stay with me. Because what I tell you in the next part is everything you need to take this from a message you heard to a change you are living. Par 19. Let me give you everything you need to take what I have shown you and make it the beginning of the season I have been building toward in your story. The Genius Switch is available to you at https://chosenecho.com/frequency. When you go there, you are going to find the full program developed by Dr. Daniel Barone and his research team, the complete auditory protocol built on 30 years of neuroscience research into hemispheric synchronization, and the specific mechanism of high-potential underperformance that has been the subject of this message. Everything you need is there. The 8-minute daily protocol. The explanation of the science in language that is clear and complete without requiring you to have a background in neuroscience. The guidance on implementation and consistency that Dr. Barone developed specifically to give his protocol users the highest possible probability of experiencing the full results of what the research showed was possible. It is all there. And I want to walk you through specifically what it costs and what it includes, because I need you to have complete information before you make the decision I am hoping you will make tonight. The retail price of the Genius Switch, the price at which it is offered in contexts outside of the arrangement I have made to get this to the people I have specifically positioned to receive it, is $49. And I want to put that in context for you, because $49 does not adequately represent what the protocol is worth measured against what the problem it solves has been costing you. Consider for a moment the cost of 1 year of living inside the gap, the cost in time of the decisions that took longer because the clarity was not there, the cost and opportunity of the rooms where you could not show up at the level the situation required, the cost in relationships of the connections that were made with the compressed version of you rather than the full version, the cost in well-being of the exhaustion of managing the fog as a chronic condition rather than addressing its source. 1 year of that cost, measured honestly, is not $49. It is orders of magnitude more than $49. And the protocol that addresses the source rather than the symptoms of all of that is available for the price of a dinner you would not remember. But tonight I am not going to ask you to pay $49. Through the specific arrangement that has been made for the people who come through this message, the people I arranged to arrive here tonight, the Genius Switch is available to you for $39. Not as a trial, not as a stripped-down version. The complete program, the full protocol, the entire research-based system that Dr. Barone spent 30 years developing, and that produces the results I have been describing throughout this message. Yours tonight for $39 through the link at https://chosenecho.com/frequency. And when you go to that link tonight, what you are going to find is not just the program itself. Dr. Barone and his team have included 4 additional resources with the program, at no additional cost to you, because they understand that the protocol does not exist in a vacuum, and that the people who experience the most complete results are the ones who have the surrounding support that helps them use what they have been given most effectively. The first of these is a morning momentum guide, a practical blueprint for the first 30 days of using the protocol that gives you the specific structure and the specific cues for making the 8-minute daily session the most powerful possible launch point for each day. The second is a focus accelerator, a supplementary technique that can be applied during specific types of tasks to extend the clarity and the flow state that the morning session initiates into the moments in the day when you most need it. The third is a sleep reset protocol, because Dr. Barone's research consistently showed that the quality of the nightly restoration is one of the key factors in the depth of the morning synchronization. And the sleep reset was developed to address the patterns that most frequently interfere with that restoration. And the fourth is access to the research documentation itself, the studies and the clinical data, and the peer-reviewed material that form the evidential foundation of the protocol, for those who want to understand not just what works but why it works at the biological level. All 4 of these are included tonight with your access to the program at https://chosenecho.com, frequency for $39. I want to be completely transparent with you about what $39 actually represents in this context, because I think clarity is a form of respect and you deserve to be respected. $39 is not the cost of a self-help book that gives you information you already had. It is not the cost of an app that tracks behavior without changing the underlying condition that makes the behavior difficult. It is not the cost of a weekend seminar where you feel inspired for 72 hours before returning to the same default setting. It is the cost of the specific neurological intervention that was designed for the specific problem that has been the specific bottleneck in the specific life you have been living. It is the cost of access to 30 years of research that was conducted for the specific purpose of solving the problem you could not solve through effort alone. And the people who have used it, and whose stories I described earlier in this message, the woman who returned to her best professional work and exceeded it, the man who reclaimed the strategic capacity that had been leaking from his business, they would tell you that $39 is not a price. It is the best investment they made in a decade. I also need to tell you about the guarantee, because the guarantee matters, and I want you to know it before you make your decision. Dr. Barone is so confident in the results of the protocol, so grounded in the decades of research and the consistent outcomes of the people who have used it, that he is offering you a complete money-back guarantee for 60 days from the date of your access. If you use the protocol consistently for 60 days, and you do not experience the shift in clarity and performance and access to your own intelligence that the research predicts and that the users consistently report, you contact the team and every dollar you paid is returned to you. No questions, no conditions. No process designed to make claiming the guarantee difficult enough that most people give up before they complete it. A clean and complete guarantee because the protocol has earned that confidence and because you deserve the protection of knowing that the risk of taking this step is as close to zero as a risk can get. One more thing I need to say before you go to the link. There are imitation programs that present themselves as versions of what Dr. Barone developed and that do not contain the specific protocol that produces the results. The market for solutions to the problems this message has been describing is large enough that where the genuine solution exists, counterfeits also exist. And the counterfeits do not work, not because the concept is flawed, but because the specific frequencies and the specific calibration and the specific sequencing that the research showed produce the synchronization results are not present in them. What is available at https://cosinecco.com frequency is the original protocol from Dr. Barone himself. What you find elsewhere with similar sounding names may not be. And I am telling you this not to create fear, but to protect the decision you are about to make. Because you have been looking for this for a long time, and I want to make sure that when you reach for it tonight, you are reaching for the real thing. Go to https://cosinecco.com/frequency tonight. The season that begins with that visit is the season I have been building toward in your story. What you find there is the practical form of everything I have been saying in this message. And what you do with it will determine how fast the chapter that follows this one begins to look like the life I designed for you before you were born. I love you. I have always loved you. And the next part of what I have to say to you is the part that matters most. Part 20. I want to close this message the way I have always closed the messages that were most important to me. Not with a summary, not with a list of things to remember, not with the kind of conclusion that wraps everything up so neatly that it feels finished, because what I have been saying to you tonight is not finished. It has just begun. What I want to close with is a word that lands in the place where all the other words have been gathering, in the place where the theology and the neuroscience and the narrative and the testimony all converge into something that is smaller and simpler and more essential than any of the individual pieces. A word that you can carry out of this message and into the rest of tonight and into tomorrow morning and into the week that follows and into the season that is about to begin. The word is this: you are not who the hard seasons told you you were. You have never been who the hard seasons told you you were. The seasons were real and the wait was real and the cost was real, and I am not asking you to deny any of that or to perform gratitude for the pain in a way that dishonors what the pain actually required from you. But the identity that the pain produced, the compressed and cautious and smaller than original version of yourself that the years of carrying too much has shaped into what felt like just who you are now, that is not the final word on who you are. That was never the final word. And tonight, finally, you have the beginning of the evidence that the final word is different, that the final word is the original word, the one I spoke over you before the seasons had a chance to speak their version. the one that includes words like capable and chosen and connected and clear and flowing and sufficient and more than enough for everything I have placed in your path. I want to tell you what I see when I look at the version of your life that is now available to you through what I have placed in your hands tonight. I see mornings that begin differently, not dramatically, not all at once, but in the quiet accumulation of morning after morning where the 8 minutes happen before the day begins, and the day begins from a different place than it has been beginning, from a place of access rather than management, from a place of flow rather than friction, from a place where the full version of the intelligence I designed for you is the version you are operating from rather than the occasional visitor it has been. I see those mornings accumulating into weeks, and the weeks accumulating into a pattern, and the pattern becoming the new normal, and the new normal beginning to produce outcomes that the old normal could not have produced because it was working with less than what the design intended. I see the day when you walk into a room that previously required you to manage the gap and you realize that the gap is not there. Not diminished, not temporarily quieter, not there. And the realization arrives not as drama but as a simple, grounded, almost quiet confirmation of something that has been building in you since the morning after you first used what I gave you tonight. I see you in that room, present in the way you were always meant to be present, accessed in the way you were always meant to be accessed, contributing at the level your design intended and your history prepared you for, and I see the look on your face when you realize that this is not a good day that will eventually end. This is the new baseline. This is what I made you for. This is what the wine press and the temple and the ordinary village and the decades of research and the precise arrangement of a message through an algorithm that I reordered with my own hand were all working toward. I see your family on the other side of this. I want to talk about your family specifically because the weight you have been carrying has not stayed within the boundaries of your own experience. Weight never does. It radiates. The version of you that has been managing the gap has been showing up for the people you love as something less than the full version of what they were given you to be, not because you chose that, not because you failed in your love for them, but because you were giving from a place of partial access, and what they deserve is the full version, the flowing version, the version that does not have to work twice as hard to be present because the presence is the natural condition rather than the achieved condition. What I see on the other side of what I am giving you tonight is your family meeting the version of you that has always been there, but that circumstances and disruption and the particular weight you have been carrying have prevented them from fully receiving. What I see is relationship that deepens because you are actually there, fully there, in the way that presence becomes a gift when it is complete rather than divided. I see the pattern breaking. I talked earlier in this message about the patterns that are older than your own story, the inherited limitations that have been running in the background of your family's experience for generations, the particular forms of the gap and the fog and the struggle that showed up in the people who came before you in different clothing, but with the same mechanism underneath. I want to tell you that what I am placing in your hands tonight is not only a gift for you, it is a gift for the line. It is the interruption of a pattern at the specific point in the chain where the interruption becomes possible for the first time, because for the first time, the specific tool that addresses the specific mechanism of the specific limitation exists and is available and has been arranged to reach you. What you do with it tonight does not only change your story, it changes what your children inherit and what their children inherit, and what the people whose lives are shaped by yours receive as the version of you that shapes them. I need to say one more thing before I release you into what comes next, and I need to say it with the full weight of everything I have been building in this message, because it is the thing that everything else has been preparing you to receive. You came to this message at a moment when you needed it. Not a coincidence, not luck, not the random gift of an algorithm that happened to fire in your direction. An arrangement, a deliberate, intentional, precisely timed arrangement by the one who has been behind every turn of your story, and who decided at this specific point in the journey that you had been in the wine press long enough, and the preparation was complete, and the tool was ready, and the season was right, and the person you had become, through everything you had been through, was exactly the person who could now receive what had been prepared and do with it what it was prepared for you to do. You are that person, right now. Not after more preparation, not after more proof, not after you have resolved the outstanding questions or corrected the outstanding failures or built the outstanding evidence that you are ready, right now, in this moment, as you are, with everything you are carrying and everything you have been through, and everything you have not yet figured out, and everything you still want, and everything you still fear, and everything you still hope for in the quiet places where hope lives in you, even when the public parts of your life cannot show it. Right now is when this begins. Right now is when the season turns. Right now is when the word I have always spoken over you, the word that predates every word the hard seasons have spoken, becomes the operating word of your life. Go to https://kosaneko.com, frequency tonight, not tomorrow, tonight, because the decision made in the momentum of this moment carries a weight that the same decision made tomorrow, after the momentum has settled and the familiar voices have had a chance to speak their familiar version of why not, cannot fully match. Tonight, in this moment, while what I have spoken into you in this message is still fresh and still moving, is when you go to the link and you take the step and you receive what was arranged for you to receive at this exact point in the story of your life. I have been trying to reach you for a long time. Tonight I did. And I need you to let that mean what it actually means, which is not that you happened to find a video that was relevant to your situation, but that the one who has never stopped seeing you, never stopped knowing you, never stopped working in the unseen places of your story toward the breakthrough you have been waiting for, reached you tonight, specifically, through the arrangement of every digital event that led your hand to press play at this hour. And what I reached you with was not just a word. It was a word and a way. The word is that you are seen and known and chosen and not forgotten and not late and not finished. And the way is at https://choseneco.com/frequency. 8 minutes a day, starting tomorrow morning. For the rest of the season I have planned for you. I am proud of you. I have always been proud of you. And the version of your life that the next season holds is going to show you, in ways you can see and touch and live in, exactly how true that has always been. I love you, and I am not done with you. Not even close.